Welcome back, guys. This is your friend, the MHA What If, with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku Inspired Neon to Become a Hero? All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Wah, wah. The baby's cry cut right through the walls, through the labyrinth-like hallways and right into the grand dining room of the Nishiyama penthouse. One would think that the baby was the one with an audio-based quirk in the family. Wah, wah. Neon, please do something about that. We are trying to eat here, said Nishiyama Anko, the matriarch of the prestigious family, as she dipped her silver spoon into the hot soup and brought it to her lips, sipping ever so delicately as not to make a sound and not to smudge her lipstick. Yes, mother, her daughter said. The 8-year-old dropped her spoon with a loud clang and pushed her chair back with unnecessary force so the chairs would make a loud scratching sound against the cold marble floor that she knew her parents loathed. Scree. Neon. Nishiyama Junichiro scolded. He glared at his daughter from the head of the table. Despite the fact that Neon took after him in physical appearance, the sharp cheekbones, the upturned brown eyes, and the small pointed nose, his middle child was like a complete stranger to him. He wished Neon would be more like her older brother, Kosher. He was just finishing up his first year in college and had given his parents practically no trouble since the day that he was born. Kosher had a useful quirk, guaranteed to help extend the prestige and wealth of the Nishiyama family businesses for many years to come and, most importantly, a willingness to do so. Neon, on the other hand, Junichiro sighed. He could only hope that her attitude and defiance was only due to her age and that she will grow out of it soon. Sorry, father, his daughter replied despite sounding otherwise and headed for the door. Wah, wah. I didn't say you were dismissed from the table, Anko sighed. Sit back down, Neon. Just use your quirk so we can all have a nice, peaceful family dinner together. Let the nurses handle your sister. That's what we hired them to do. I'm full, Neon said without turning away from the door. Even so, she raised her right hand and snapped her fingers. Immediately, a bubble appeared from the center of the room, encasing the dining table and those sitting around them. From her side of the bubble, Neon could still hear the cries, but the relaxed shoulders of her father and the fact that her mother and brother returned to eating their second course let her know that her sound barrier was working perfectly. Wah, wah. The sound acted as an alarm, reminding Neon of the task at hand. She exited the dining room, knowing full well that she wasn't really in trouble for leaving without permission. Her parents valued their own well-being over everything else, and having a peaceful dinner outweighed Neon's defiance and her presence at the table. Neon went straight to her baby sister's room. When she entered the nursery, all the nurses greeted her with relieved smiles. Oju-san. Thank goodness you're here, the head nurse said, an elderly lady with a white apron covering her gray dress. She handed the tiny baby to Neon and the cries immediately stopped when the baby's eyes connected with her sister's. The baby gurgled a little laugh and then reached out to grab a long strand of her sister's black hair. It's okay, Akia-chan. Neon cooed softly as she bounded the baby gently in her arms. I'm here, Ne-chan is here. -6 years later. Don't you want me, baby? Don't you want me? Oh. Don't you want me dash. Neon yawned, moved her headphones off her ears and sat back in her computer chair. She tilted the screen down from her laptop and stretched her arms over her head. As she did so, bubbles of all different shapes and sizes that originally hovered around her all moved up towards the ceiling as if stretching themselves. Tick, tick, tick. Her eyes moved over to the clock near her four-poster bed and she ran her hand through her hair. What was once long and black had turned short and blonde. To her father's dismay, Neon's defiance only grew with age, and nothing was more pleasing to her than to see where her parents' limits were. Sporting a blunt bob with dyed red tips was her most recent experiment, which resulted in quite a favorable reaction for Neon. 2:37 a.m., she muttered out loud. Shit, it's late, and I still haven't started schoolwork. She moved the laptop away from a worksheet it had been resting on. Career and School Survey, titled the sheet with everything left blank except for Neon's name and class. There was nothing written for school targets, career goals, and additional notes. Neon rubbed her face and then brought her laptop back to its position. The listings of all the different concerts behind held that week in Japan flooded back up on the screen and Neon grinned. Or, I could continue with this and just ask for another extension. I can turn it in later. I hope. Entrance exams is months away anyways. Right? Or, I could put in you a hero course again just to see Ida-kun blow a gasket again. That guy can't take a joke when it comes to hero stuff. She sighed and swung her chair in a circle as she debated her choices. The bubbles around her moved along with it. Neon enjoyed the sound of the slight creak the chair made since the gears were slightly rusted. The house was so eerily quiet, especially at night, that any sound was welcomed and savored by Neon. She missed the sounds of the city as well as the perks and conveniences of living in one, but unfortunately she agreed with her parents that moving to the middle of nowhere was the right move. It was for Akia's safety. After all, even though Akia hasn't fully developed her quirk yet, it was still something they had to keep away from the outside world. Nay. Neon's head jerked in the direction of her sister's room. The cry was so muffled that an average person couldn't possibly have heard it, but Neon wasn't an average person when it came to sound. She leapt out of her chair, letting it crash to the floor, and she ran to her sister's room, past the two armed guards stationed outside with a trail of bubbles following her. Akia! Neon shouted as she kicked down the door before the guards could even react, and then her face went pale when she saw the empty bed, 3 fallen guards on the floor, and the curtain fluttering from the open window. The guards glanced over the top of Neon's head and they sprang into action. Red alert. The treasure has been taken. I repeat, the treasure has been dash. One of the guards started to say into the mic pinned to this lapel but then was stopped short when Neon grabbed him and yanked him towards her seething face. That is my sister. She's a person, she hissed before tossing him to the side and then snapped the fingers in her left hand while jabbing a finger against her throat with her right index finger. Oh, Neon thundered with her voice amplified to the point that the windows of the entire floor shattered at the first word, releasing her voice to the outside world louder and clearer than a sound system at a stadium concert. Everyone wake the fuck up. Akia has been taken. Akia is gone. Akia, I know you can hear this, don't worry. Nechan is coming for you. You know what to do. Neon then flicked her hands forward and the bubbles behind her sailed out through the open window and dispersed throughout the estate. Red lights began to turn off and off inside the mansion while outside fog lights began to sweep across the area, but otherwise there was no other sound. Normally there would be an alarm blaring to alert everyone, but with Neon there, it would only prove to be hindrance. Neon raced to the window and she jumped right onto the windowsill. She grabbed the window frame to steady herself as she leaned out as far as she could and closed her eyes. Come on, find her. Akia, where are you? Is she really gone? Enko cried as she hurried into the room with the train of her silk, red robe flowing behind her. Her husband, in a matching blue robe, came in behind her with 2 revolvers in each of his hands. No, mother. This was all a ploy to get you out of bed, Neon muttered sarcastically. Now shut up. I'm trying to find Akia. Enko let out a small gasp and she took a step back from her child, but she bit her tongue. She will let this little outburst fly for the sake of her youngest. After all, Akia's quirk should not belong in anyone's hands but their families. Pop. Here I go again on my own / going down the only road I've ever known. There. Neon said as she pointed her free hand in the direction of the song outburst, towards the western gate. Ugh. What a horrible song. Is that really what people call music? Enko asked with a wrinkle of her nose. Not now, mother. Neon shouted exasperatedly. A sound bubble has burst near the western gate. All teams move to the western gate, the guard shouted into his mic while Neon reached her hand back to her mother. Oh yeah, mother. A little help? Neon asked. Enko sighed. Oh Neon, just let the guards get her back. It would be unsightly for you to be running around out there with Dash. Do it, Enko, Junichiro said gruffly. We need to get Akia back. No matter what it takes. Go Neon. And I'll alert the hero agencies. Thanks, I think. Neon said as Enko hesitantly stretched out her hand and touched her fingers to Neon's palm. Immediately on contact, Neon's heart started to race and everything within her seemed to fire on all cylinders. Akia, I'm coming. Neon shouted as she somersaulted out of the window and down to the gardens below. She caught onto a nearby tree branch at the last second and swung herself down the last few feet, landing safely on the grass. Without missing a beat, she sprinted for the gates. Her mother's enhancement quirk could boost the physical and mental capacity of any human by 300%, but it only lasted for 5 minutes, so Neon could not waste any time. Pop. Y'all gon' make me lose my mind, / up in here, / up in here. Neon skidded to a halt and her head flicked towards the east gate. Shit. There must be more than one kidnapper and they split up. Neon seethed as she dashed towards the east gate. She debated if she should amplify her voice to alert the guards, but she didn't want to give the kidnappers a chance to change direction, so she stayed silent. She could only pray that there was someone close enough to hear that besides her to let everyone else know. She ran past her father's precious statue park and leapt over her mother's prized koi pond. She didn't even bother to run around the rose bushes and just charged right through them, her adrenaline enhanced enough for her not to feel the pain of sharp thorns tearing across her skin and clothes. The iron doors of the east gate were bent open at an angle, showing signs of someone going through it with sheer force. The guards on each side of the gates were hanging limply out of the guard tower, but Neon didn't have time to check if they were all right. Akia didn't have time for that. Neon raced through the east gate, which led to forked road through a forest that stood between their estate and 2 other cities. Shit, Neon cursed and then brought her finger back to her throat. There was nothing else she could do now. Akia. Neon shouted as the trees swayed from her sound wave and the leaves fell to the ground. Where are you? Shit. That sounded close. Do you think Dash? Idiot. How many times do I have to tell you to stay quiet? One of their kids has a sound-based quirk. Good enough, Neon said as she ran towards the voices down the road to her right. She couldn't ignore her fear as she ran though. If they knew about her quirk, then they had done their homework in terms of this kidnapping. They didn't get through the guards and their security system just with physicality. They were prepared, which meant they were professionals. Snap. Crunch. 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 Neon thanked whichever deity was watching for the big break. The kidnappers could have ran along the road, but that would have made it easier for them to be seen, so they chose to run along the forest ground. There was no way they could run without creating noise. Neon snapped her fingers, creating a sound bubble around her feet, masking any noise of her own running as she closed in on the kidnappers. When she saw a group of shadows in the distance, Neon jumped up against a nearby tree, digging her feet against the side of the trunk, and then pushed herself up into the branches. She leapt from branch to branch as she got closer and closer to the shadows, with the only signs of her presence the handful of leaves that fell from her footsteps. 2 more minutes and then Mother's enhancement wears off, Neon thought to herself as she broke off a thick branch about the size of her own arm and flung it as far as she could in front of her and the kidnappers. But the kidnappers stopped in their tracks, staring up ahead, giving Neon the chance to close in. As she did so, her throat tightened. Because of the voices, she had thought there were only 2 kidnappers, but there were 3. One was significantly larger than the rest, which could explain the dent in the gate. Neon cautiously climbed towards them and stopped when she was hovering over them on a tree branch. Her eyes never left them as she slowly took out her phone from her pocket. One of the kidnappers was a large man with a rubber tiger mask over his head. He had a black sack over his shoulder, which Neon could only assume contained Akia. The other 2 were about average in terms of build and stature. One had on a black ski mask and the other a red and white luchador mask. What should we do, Kazuki? The man in the black mask squeaked. I told you not to use my real name, the man in the red and white luchador mask hissed, and Neon couldn't help but gasp at the familiar voice. Even if she didn't recognize the name, she never forgot a voice, and it was not lost on her. Unfortunately, nor was her own noise. The man in the tiger mask looked up in her direction, and even through the many levels of branches between them, their eyes still managed to lock. Before Neon could react, he leapt into the air like a rocket and grabbed the branch she was on with one claw-like hand. It snapped easily under his weight and sent her tumbling down onto the floor. But, oof! Neon gasped as her back slammed onto the foliage, feeling a sickening crunch in her right leg, and the 3 men crowded around her. Should we kill her? The man in the tiger mask asked, revealing a nasally and high-pitched voice Neon did not expect from a guy of his size. Let Akia go. Neon groaned as she propped herself up by the elbows, ignoring the unmistakable sight of bone poking out from shin. If it's money you want, take me, hold me for ransom. Let Akia go. The man in the luchador mask clucked as he knelt down so Neon could see the coldness in his black beady eyes. I thought of all people in the Nishiyama family, you would give me more credit than that, Oji-san. You're the driver we used to have before we moved here, Neon said. I remember you? You dash. I was fired without reason by your father despite dedicating 10 whole years to your family. 10. Kazuki snarled, and what do I get out of it? 1 month's severance pay. That's it? 1 month for 10 years. You think you're the only disgruntled employee? Take a number, Neon scoffed. File a lawsuit. I'm sure there's already several out there that you can get on. Why endanger a child? Akia has done nothing wrong. That may be true, but she will be far more lucrative to me than any settlement I can get out of your father, Kazuki said. And, not just that, I know what kind of character your father is. Taking his precious cash cow away from him would be more painful to him than any amount of money I can get. So you figured out Akia's quirk. Even though we took all the precautions to make sure no one knew, including your dismissal and hiring an entirely new and scaled-down staff, Neon snorted, I should tell Kosher. He'll be devastated by this oversight. It would make for a great graduation gift. Ah, it took a while but I figured it out despite all of your efforts, Kazuki said, and, once I did I realized that she is the severance pay I deserve. You're just as bad as my family, Neon snarled, cash cow, treasure, it's all the same to you and him. Akia's more than just her quirk. She's more precious than any diamond she could ever make. What? Tiger Mask cried. Oi, oi, oi. The man in the black ski mask said as he took a step towards Kazuki, that's what her quirk is? This brat can make diamonds? You never told us that part of the plan. You just said we'd get multiple ransom payments from her family. Kazuki stammered. You of all people should know the importance of keeping your employees happy. Neon scoffed as she shakily got herself up and hopped on her good leg while blood dripped down her right foot. What did you promise them? 20% of each ransom payment. 30% each, Tiger Mask said. You're a terrible businessman, Neon chided. I would have given them 25% each. What? Enough. Kazuki said as he backpacked Neon hard across the face, sending her flying to the ground. I will not be spoken to that way. Especially by someone like you. You who were lucky enough to be born into a life that you could have everything you could possibly want. You who never has to work a day in your life. You who dash. I get it. I got lucky in a big way because of my name, Neon said as she shakily pushed herself off of the ground. Despite her pain, Neon got to her feet and crossed her hands over her chest. With only seconds away from her mother's enhancement, that this was the only thing she could think of to do and she knew this was the best plan she was ever going to come up with. Her sound bubbles came racing towards her from all different directions and collected around her body like she was clad in bubble wrap. You guys popped a bubble earlier. You know how loud one can get? Imagine how loud it'll be if all 323 go off at once, Neon said as she felt the effects of her mother's quirk wear off, leaving her with nothing but the feeling of fatigue and hunger. 300 and dash, Kazuki gasped and Neon smirked. Since it's too dangerous for Akia to go out into the world, I've been busy recording and bringing the world to her. I've recorded everything from live concerts to the sounds of a large waterfall hitting up against the rocks. Let her go and I won't detonate my bubbles. I should tell you that it's not just sound that you should be worried about. Even I won't be safe from the sound waves that will burst from these bubbles, Neon said. I have no idea how much force all of these combined will be and what damage they will do. You're going to endanger even your own sister? Kazuki demanded. Better to hurt her now than to let her go into a life of God knows what with you all. Neon spat. Now give her to me. Or, we go with Plan C, the man in the ski mask said. Plan C? Both Neon and Kazuki asked simultaneously. Bang! Gah! Kazuki screamed as a bullet shot out from a gun in the ski mask's hand and tore through his calf. The former driver fell to the ground and howled in pain. What? Neon gasped. Make a noise. It doesn't matter, the man in the ski mask said. We'll be up and gone before anybody gets here and we'll just let this fool take the blame. I'll tell them everything about you. Everything. You won't get away with this, Kazuki snarled. You really think we gave you our real names? The man in the ski mask laughed and Kazuki's eyes widened. That child is right. You are a terrible businessman and terrible businessmen should not be making deals with criminals. Then the man in the ski mask turned to Neon and when their eyes met, her whole body started to tremble with fright. So this is what a villain looks like. A true bad guy. Drop your bubbles, it's useless to us, the ski-masked man said. But the shockwave dash, Neon started to say, but even her own words sounded flat in her ears. Useless. The man repeated and put his hands on the floor. Immediately, a thick metal wall erupted from the ground, separating Neon from her sister and her captors and stretched as far as Neon could see in either direction. No. Neon said as she uncrossed her arms and hobbled towards the wall. Sorry, girlie. You lose. The ski-masked man sang out from the wall as she beat her fists against it. No. 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 Akia. Akia. Neon screamed as her bubbles flew up against the wall and burst into a huge cacophony of sound. Guitar riffs mixed with several different cheering crowds, cymbal crashes, foghorns, the booms of thunder, and everything sound imaginable came together in one loud and fantastic blast and sent Neon flying back away from the wall that only received a slight dent from the sound. A tree stopped Neon from going any further and her back slammed hard against the trunk, which splintered from the other side. She fell to the ground like a rag doll and her mind felt just as lifeless as tears pooled out from her eyes. She didn't know what happened to Kazuki nor could she bring herself up to care. Okay, Nei-chan. Is sorry, Nei-chan. Failed? Neon whispered as she blacked out. Sexy stomp. Boom. A strong gust of wind broke through just as giant purple boots stomped down on the metal wall, crushing it into nothing and sending leaves and debris flying right at Neon, who woke up from the loud racket. She didn't know how long she had been asleep and it took her a moment for her to even remember where she was. She could only flinch and close her eyes, too weak to even cover her face. As she slowly opened up her eyes again, she saw the boots standing in front of her, but this time they were normal-sized and they were worn by a human-sized lady. Neon's tears fell once again, but this time with relief. Hello? Does this girl belong to you? Asked a beautiful lady with creamy long hair. She held the man in the ski mask and tiger-masked man by their collars with the other. Both seemed to have been knocked unconscious. There's another one out there. Kazuki, he's wearing a red and white wrestling mask. Neon heard herself say and looked incredulously at this woman. Who are you? Good to know. I'll go look for him, the lady said, and then she jutted out a hip and gave Neon a wink. I'm MB Lady. I just debuted not too long ago. Pleasure to meet your ass acquaintance. You know, if it wasn't for that racket earlier, I wouldn't have known to come in this direction. This forest is so big and dark. What was that noise anyway? It sounded like a monster truck show collided with the Olympics. That was me. Neon said as she looked at the broken wall behind them. I guess my quirk was good for something. If it wasn't for your quirk, I wouldn't have come in this direction, MT Lady replied. If anything, that means you've saved this little girl's life. That makes your quirk good enough for a hero. Hero? Non skufa, im noaru. She'll probably see you as one, MT Lady said with a nod to Akia, who stirred in her sleep and then her eyes slowly opened up. Nei-chan? Akia whispered and then her eyes widened and she shined a smile more dazzling than any diamond Neon had ever seen her make. I knew it. You saved me. You saved me. I didn't dash. Neon started to protest, but then her words were cut short as Akia's hands flung around Neon's neck and squeezed the breath right out of her. Ditch. Too hard, Akia. Too hard. I knew you'd save me. Akia laughed as she pulled back and beamed at her sister. Like I said. I didn't. Neon said, it was all dash. She looked over at nothing but the broken wall, and not just the two but all three kidnappers tied up together and hanging from the branch of a nearby tree. When did she even do that? Neon demanded. Oh, do what? Akia asked. What's going on? Neon sighed and a begrudging smile tugged at the corner of her lips. I think Ida-kun is going to be really mad at me. And to solve for X, we use the formula here to dash. Bam. The door to the third year's classroom slammed open by the base of Neon's crutch and she hobbled right over to the middle seat in the front row with her bubbles following behind her in a small cluster. She ignored the gasps from her classmates at the cast on her legs and the scratches and bruises that her black hoodie and jeans couldn't cover. She even ignored the blustering from the teacher behind her. To be honest, she wasn't sure if it was her homeroom teacher talking or someone else. She didn't even know what class it was. She never really paid attention to who was doing the talking. It was all in the textbooks and she finished those a long time ago. It didn't matter anyways because she wasn't here to take whatever class this was. There was something else she needed to learn. Ida-kun, I'm going to apply to the hero course at UA, Neon said, and I'm not joking this time. The room fell into a silence before everyone erupted into laughter while Tenya's eyes narrowed at her. Oh yeah, Nishiyama. It's bad enough you come in 4 hours late and not even in uniform, but to come in just to tease Ida like that dash. The teacher behind started to say, but then Neon snapped her fingers without looking back at him and his voice was drowned out by the sound bubble that appeared around his head, which made his natural shiny spherical head shape stand out even more. Gah. So noisy, Neon said as she stared right into the boy's eyes. So, will you help me? Nishiyama-san, using your quirk is not allowed on school dash, Tenya started to say, but then the solemnity of Neon's expression gave him pause. The boy's frown intensified as he studied her quietly and stonily. The entire class waited for him to tear Neon a new one and lecture her into a comatose state the way they've seen him do thousands of times when she pulled one of her stunts, but Neon knew better. They had been in the same school and same class for almost their entire lives. She had never asked for his help before and he knew that. She would also not come into school like this and tell him this just because she felt like it. He knew that too. Flashback. Neon and Tenya at 8 years old. And then Nissan ran out of the burning building just as it was about to collapse, carrying the last of the people left in there. He saved 5 people on his own. Tenya shouted as he thrusted his hands up into the air while the group of 4th graders gathered around him clapped and cheered. Wow. Tenya-kun, that was great storytelling. What a wonderful presentation. It's clear your brother is an amazing hero. No wonder you are so proud of him, the teacher said, a young gentlewoman who always managed to get any stains solely on her apron and nowhere else. Now then, class, what did you all think of his story? Tenya-kun. Your brother is great. Ingenium for the win, a little boy said. I love hero stories, another girl said. The teacher smiled warmly at the center of attention, who seemed to beam with pride at her words. Then the teacher looked down and put a gentle hand on the girl sitting at the back of the group with her headphones on while reading a book. It took a second for the girl to look up at her, but when she finally did, the teacher moved her headphones away from her head. You need to listen to your classmate's presentation, Neon-chan. It's Dash. Don't call me Neon-chan. Neon grumbled, we're not close. It sounds weird coming from you. Ah, okay. Well then, Nishiyama-chan. The teacher tried again. It's rude not to pay attention, especially when everyone listened to your story. Yeah, but I told a new story that no one has ever heard before. Neon said and then pointed at the boy in the center of the circle. I've already heard that story. It was on the news just a couple days ago. Why I do need to hear it again? So rude, her classmates chided. Ugh, Neon. She's so selfish. Sensei. Make her go sit in the timeout chair. Neon wrinkled her nose and covered her ears with her hands. So noisy, she screamed. Gah. Why do we have to sit here and listen anyways to everyone speak? What is the point of this assignment? Nishiyama-chan. Please behave, the teacher protested as she started to move Neon's hands away from her ears. Nishiyama-san. Suddenly, Tenya was in front of Neon and looked at her patiently until she lowered her hands voluntarily. When she did, he jutted out his hands. The point of this assignment was not to tell a new story. The point is for us to test our speaking skills in front of a big group of people, and for everyone listening, they need to think about the good and bad points of what they hear for their own improvement. Everyone waited for Neon to throw another tantrum and to scream back at Tenya, but that didn't happen. To everyone's shock, the girl casually placed her headphones at her feet, closed her book, and folded her hands over them to stare expectantly at the boy. Oh, got it. Do you want me to be honest then? Yes, please, Tenya said. Well, I only heard the first part, but I liked the how to say this, the beat of how you spoke. It was nice and steady, but your sentences are long. Why long? Neon said as she stretched out her hands for indication. It should be like a song. There should be a break every now and then. Sections. Lines. Tenya bowed his head. Thank you for your opinion. I understand. Neon smiled and gave a firm nod. Happy to help. Then she got to her feet. As she left to put the book back in its space in the bookshelf, Tenya and the teacher caught each other's eye behind her back. Tenya looked solemnly at the teacher. Nishiyama-san gets mad when she has to do something without knowing why she has to do it. Oh, now that you mention it, the teacher said as she stared at the girl in a new light. She does ask that question a lot in class. Thank you, Tenya-kun, for pointing that out to me. Actually, sensei, could you please not call me Tenya-kun either? Not you too. Present day. Why? Tenya finally asked, which surprised even the teacher into silence. Because you have a better understanding of the process and what they will be looking for. Neon started to say, but Tenya shook his head. No. I wasn't asking why you needed my help. If you're going to do this, you will definitely need my help, he said without hesitation and with a swift chop of his hands. I'm asking you, why the sudden change of heart? Why do you want to be a hero? I've told you before to not make a mockery of the hero course. There are thousands of students who see this as their dream, and if you are doing it merely out of the whim of a bored heiress, you would be trampling on their determination and dedication. Snap. Suddenly, a bubble appeared around Neon and Tenya, muting their voices so that the outside world couldn't hear. Okay. I'm going to totally level with you on this one. It's not that I want to be a hero. I really don't, Neon admitted, but I have to. For Akia. Your sister? Tenya asked, and then he almost leapt out of his seat. Did something happen to her again? Is that why you're in this state? Neon nodded. My father called your brother, but another hero ended up stepping in, and it's a long story. The point is, we both know Akia's quirk. Right now she can only make tiny diamonds, but it's only a matter of time before she gets the hang of it, and that's going to draw a lot of attention. My family is going to use as much money and power as they can to keep her quirk unknown, but there's a chance that word will get out, and then someone big and bad will want to get her. When that day comes, she's going to become an even bigger target, and the guys coming after her are only going to get nastier. I don't want that for her. I want her to have a normal life. To be able to go outside instead of protected in the middle of nowhere. and I realized maybe I can do that if I become a hero. A hero's job is not just to protect one person, Tenya said sternly, it is their duty to protect all citizens. Yes, I get that and I will take that on, Neon said. One villain I put away is one less villain I'll have to worry about coming after Akia. But Nishiyama-san being a hero dash. Iriken, please, Neon said as she lowered her head. I can't just stand by and do nothing. Last night was a close call and I watched Akia get taken right before my very eyes. I was too weak. This is the only way. Fine. Neon straightened up and she blinked at him. So you'll help? Tenya nodded. Yes. What do you need to know? Snap. The bubble popped and a genuine smile stretched across Neon's face. Excellent. Let's begin with the exam process. What will they be testing on? Nishiyama Neon. Take your seat now, the teacher thundered and Neon flinched at the loud noise. She stuck her finger in one of her ear as she turned to him. Ah, shit. Guess I popped your bubble too, Neon said. My mistake. Why your mistake? The teacher blustered. You mean you meant to keep that thing around me longer? Well, you have a tendency to drone on and on and on about nothing, Neon said. I was just sparing the rest of the class. I am trying to teach, the teacher shouted and Neon sighed and tilted her head so she could see the question behind him. X is 37. This formula is so basic. Whoever hasn't gotten it by now will never get it, so what's the point of talking about it anymore? She said flatly and then raised her hand. There. Class dismissed. Snap. Pop. School's out / for the summer. The teacher's face went from red to purple. Principal's office. Now. -4 months later. UA High School Hero Course, Exam Orientation. Yep. This is it. Even though Neon was just reading out loud the signage outside the meeting room, Tenya couldn't help but notice that it had the same inflection as one would read a death sentence. Was this really the same girl who came to him a few months ago and said she was serious as hell about becoming a hero? He jutted out his hands and gave her a stern look. Nishiyama-san, if you're having second thoughts, I will not blame you dash. What? She swung out her hand and lightly backhanded his chest before pushing open one of the doors and waiting for him to enter first. Shut up. I got to do this for Akia, and I won't waste all the help you and your family provided while I prep for this either. A corner of Tenya's lips turned upwards. This was as close to a verbal thank you he would ever get from Neon and he knew it. Tenya gave a small nod of acknowledgement and then walked into the room. It was a big tier-styled lecture room with a vast stage and screen at the front. There were over 20 rows of seats that faced the stage like a forum. They were quite early due to Tenya's insistence, so there were only a handful of seats taken. Most of them were near the back. This was why Neon was surprised that Tenya would forego his usual seat choice of front and center and took a seat right in the middle of the middle row. She raised an eyebrow at him and he pointed at the stage. This way we'll be eye level and can see everything clearly and straight on, he said. Oh, was all Neon said as she took the seat next to him and leaned back in her chair to see how far it could go. Unfortunately, it wasn't very far, so she lifted her feet and rested them on the desk so that she could get comfortable. Nishiyama-san. You should show some respect to Dash. Tenya started to protest, but Neon already had her headphones on and her eyes closed while her thumb hovered over the next button on her phone screen. It looked like she was sleeping, but Tenya could tell by how her thumb was constantly tapping through her playlist that she was far from relaxed. In fact, she was preparing. As more and more hero hopefuls entered the room, the noise level rose higher and higher and Neon's feet began to tap together and her brows furrowed. The more people, the faster her feet tapped until finally she had had enough. She swung her legs down and buried her head under her arms, mashing her headphones closer to her ears. Tenya could hear her mutter, "Don't use your quirk here. Don't use your quirk here. Don't use your quirk here," over and over again under her sleeves, and he felt a little proud that she was taking his suggestions to heart. Finally the lights dimmed and a hush fell over the crowd. Tenya put a hand on Neon's shoulder and her head emerged from under her arms. It wasn't until someone came to the stage did Neon remove her headphones. The stage lights and screen flicked on and illuminated the presenter from all angles. A 3D rendering of the UA logo gleamed in gold on the screen while a skinny man with hair slicked straight back and up like a frozen blonde flame stood beneath the logo. He was clad almost entirely in leather and chains. "For all you examinee listeners tuning in," he started to say, and Neon's ears perked up, "Welcome to my show. Everybody say, hey." Nobody responded, and for the first time since Neon had stepped into the room, it was absolutely silent. She raised an eyebrow. "I guess it takes more than just pretty words from the voice hero present mic to amp these people up, but to think that famous hero is an instructor at this school, they're really not messing around here. Well then, let me quickly present to you the rundown on the practical exam, Present Mike said with a touch less confidence as before. Are you ready? Still his question was met with silence and Neon was starting to feel bad for the guy. She moved her finger to her throat but then her hand was grabbed by Tenya. She looked to him and he shook his head. Right, don't use my quirk here. She muttered. So cool. It's the voice hero Present Mike. I listen to him every week on the radio. I can't believe I get to see him in person. I'm so moved. All the teachers at UA are pro heroes. Shut up, Deku. Neon turned to look for the two noisy boys. She spotted a boy with curly dark green hair and freckles dotting his cheekbones and a sullen boy with spiky blonde, almost white hair and a scowl that seemed permanently etched into his facial structure. Suddenly, Neon found herself being turned around and she looked to see that Tenya had grabbed her chair. When their eyes met, he motioned to keep her eyes forward. Pay attention, Nishiyama-san. This is important, he said under his breath. Right. Sorry, Neon replied back and settled back in her seat. As it says on the application requirements, you listeners will be conducting 10-minute mock urban battles after this. Present Mike said as the screen changed into a map breakdown of the different battle areas. You can bring whatever you want with you. After the presentation, you'll head to the specified battle center on your registration card. Got it? Both Tenya and Neon nodded to no one in particular. Tenya didn't have to look again at his registration card to remember that he was assigned to Battle Center B and Neon didn't have to look at hers to know that Tenya would know what battle center she'd be. In fact, she was sure that he had her registration card because she sure as hell didn't. In other words, they won't let you work with your friends? Kaken. You're right. Even though our examinee numbers are consecutive, we're assigned to different battle centers. Don't look or I'll kill you. Yeah. Tis it. Damn. Now I can't crush you. Neon clenched her fists and brought them to her lap while Tenya kept a firm hold on her chair. So noisy. I can't take it. So noisy. So noisy. All this chattering. Can't they see I'm trying to concentrate here? I'm trying to learn the rules. I'm trying to pass this damn exam so I can be a damn hero. I'm trying to— Oh, crap. I'm not listening. She blinked and refocused her mind on the presenter when suddenly Tenya shot out of his chair with a handout in his hand. Excuse me. May I ask you a question? He demanded with his other hand holding firmly up in the air. Idakum. Neon asked just as a spotlight beamed down on him. Okay. What's your question? Present Mike asked. You said there were 3 different types of villains but on the printout, it clearly shows 4 types of villains. If this is a misprint, then UA, the most prominent school in Japan, should be ashamed of that foolish mistake. We examinees are here in this place because we wish to be exemplary heroes. With that said, Ida started to say and as he turned to point at someone in the back, he was interrupted by the girl sitting right next to him. Just wanting to add on to that. Neon shouted as she slammed her hands down on the table to push herself up and glare towards the 2 chattering monkeys that were making so much noise. You too. Shut up. If you're here to chit-chat and fanboy on heroes and stuff, do it on your own damn time. You guys are too distracting. Fanboy? Did you just call me a fanboy? Don't lump me with the likes of Deku. I'll kill you, the boy with the spiky hair shouted as he stood up to glare at Neon more directly. Gah. Just shut up already. You're too loud. Neon groaned as she clamped her hand over her own ears while the other boy with the curly hair slapped his hand over his mouth and hung his head. Okay. Examinee number 7111, 7112, and 2233. All 3 of you take your seats, Present Mike said, and I will answer examine number 7111's question. What high energy we have today. Neon scowled at the spiky hair boy for one more second before flopping back down on her seat. Nishiyama-san, I was going to say something about them talking. You didn't have to do it, Ida said but continued to stand. Neon shrugged. Meh. I figured my delivery would be better. Tenya raised an eyebrow but he bit his tongue. Why rile her up even more? As examinee number 7111 pointed out, there is indeed a 4th villain but unlike the others, the 4th type is worth 0 points. That one is considered an obstacle course, Present Mike explained. There's one in every battle center. An obstacle that will go crazy in narrow spaces. It's not impossible to defeat but there's no reason to defeat it either. I recommend that you listeners try to avoid it. Tenya bowed to the hero. Thank you very much for answering my question. Please excuse the interruption. That is all I have to say, Present Mike finished. Finally, I'll give you a present, our school's motto. The hero Napoleon Bonaparte once said, a true hero is someone who overcomes life's misfortunes. Go beyond, plus ultra. Did you get all that? Do you understand all the rules? Tenya asked under his breath. There were rules. Neon asked back. Ida sighed and handed her 2 sheets of paper, her registration card and his copy of the printout. He had highlighted all the key points and added everything the presenter said in neat bullet points. Just read this while on your way to Battle Arena A. Oh phew. I knew you had my card, Neon said as she took the sheet. You must read the printout. Tenya insisted and Neon gave him a small salute. Yes, sir. Wait. Stupid die job. Neon ignored that familiar angered voice and continued to snap her fingers while pressing play on her phone. With every press, she formed a bubble the size of a beach ball before releasing it and moving it above her head. Her collection had already grown enough that her cluster of bubbles covered her like a beach umbrella. The bubbles also had various tints to them. Most of them were either blue or pink, but there were also some yellow and green tinted bubbles too. Hey, I'm talking to you. Neon blinked at the spiky-haired boy and then she held up her phone to him. What are you dash? Click. The boy's eyes turned red. Did you just take my picture? He demanded. Yeah, Neon said as she inspected the photo and then put her phone back in her pocket. When I tell my little sister about the exam, I want to be sure I have a photo of the noisy boy. A noisy boy. Oi. My name's Bakugo Katsuki. Remember it well because I'm going to be dash dot. Oh. Look. You can see the moon even when the sun's out, Neon said as she snapped a photo of that as well. I think I'll actually send that to Akia now. Are you even listening to me? Not really, Neon replied and then put her phone back in her pants pocket after she sent the photo to her sister. Before they all loaded onto a bus to go to their designated area, each applicant was allowed time to change into whatever clothes they brought for the physical part of the exam. Neon wore the navy blue tracksuit supplied by her school, but she left her track jacket unzipped, revealing a white tank top underneath with the words "Solo" prominently displayed on her shirt. Each letter was actually a musical symbol, with the S being the treble clef, the O's being 2/8 notes linked together, and a final bar line as the L. Her headphones sat on her head, and though it was not connected to her phone, the noise cancellation feature was turned on. You shouldn't worry about what I'm doing, Neon said as she counted how many bubbles she actually had in her cluster. Focus on the exam. Who says I'm worried about you? The boy yelled back. His face had turned almost demonic with all of his sharp teeth showing as he talked. I just came to warn you not to get in my way. Okay, Neon was all said back. And I'm not a fanboy. Okay. You're a noisy boy. I'm not a noisy boy. Okay. Stop saying, okay. Sure. Why you dash? Okay. Start. Yeah. The two of them looked up to see President Mike standing on top of a stone tower with his arms spread wide. What's wrong? There are no countdowns in real fights. Run. 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 Neon took off as soon as she heard no countdowns, but she was already several feet behind the ones who acted the fastest, including Noisy Boy, who was flying above everyone by blasting out fire from his hands like a rocket. However, Neon didn't dwell too much on that. Instead, she focused on getting away from the crowd. She was stuck in the middle of the pack, and as much as she wanted to, she wasn't allowed to use her quirk against people or cause them harm. That was the most irritating rule out of the list Tenya had given her. She had to rely on her natural physical abilities for now. Ugh! Get out of my way! Neon shouted as she pushed herself towards the side of the group until she found an open doorway into an empty building. It was quite impressive that the school was able to build mock cities for its students, but Neon wasn't looking to admire the vast infrastructure at the moment. She was just trying to get to higher ground. She raced up the steps of the building and up onto the rooftops. From high above, she could see the mass group of students was starting to thin as more of them tapered off into different alleyways and cross streets. The sounds of explosions emitted from somewhere several blocks to the east of Neon, and it was followed by small plumes of smoke. Get out of my way. That's my villain, she heard Noisy Boy scream above the ruckus. Neon sucked in a breath and ran as far as she could in the other direction. She took a giant leap right on the edge of the roof and landed on the building next door, which was about 6 feet away from each other. She jumped from rooftop to rooftop towards where it was quieter and less people. Target acquired. Neon tumbled onto the nearest building just as an olive-green robot rolled out onto the street below with a 2 painted on the back of its arm. It was heading towards 2 other examinees, a boy and a girl. Neon scrambled to the side of the building and pointed 2 fingers forward just as the 2 examinees ran towards the villain. This one's mine, the boy yelled. No, mine, the girl said, but they both froze when 2 blue-tinted bubbles stuck to each side of the robot's neck. Pop, pop. Wub 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 wub. Aish. The boy and the girl clamped their hands to their ears as a strong bass reverb exploded from the bubbles. The hinge on the neck of the robot started to spark and tremble before the entire head snapped off and rolled to the ground. Sorry, that one was mine, Neon called out from the top as she jumped to another rooftop with her bubbles trailing her. When she got to a clear street crossing with no one and no signs of battle, Neon leapt off the roof, grabbed the pole of a nearby streetlight and swung herself up and over several times before propelling herself towards the center of street. She landed perfectly on her feet with her arms outstretched over her head and with a begrudging thanks to her mother for forcing her to take gymnastics during elementary school. Target acquired. 3 more robots, 2 ones and 1 two, bursted out from different corners of the street and they came racing at Neon. She flicked her hand down. Pink-tinted bubbles came shooting out and lodging themselves on various parts of each robot. Whack! A long white strip of something suddenly shot out from behind Neon and it wrapped around and bound together the 2 robot. Neon whirled around just in time to see a flat-faced boy with the white strip coming out of his elbow grinning at her. Sorry, I'm taking this one, he said as he grabbed the end of the strip and swung the robot into the side of a nearby building. Shit. Neon muttered, sorry? Huh. What are you apologizing for? For this. Snap. Crash. High-pitched piercing shrieks broke through her sound bubbles and it struck the remaining robots, causing them to short-circuit with steam coming out of its joints. The sound also shattered all the windows in a 20-foot radius. The boy let out a startled cry as he covered his arms with his hands and ducked into the hole in the building he had created from his robot takedown while Neon yanked out the entire arm of the nearest robot to use it as cover. When the glass shards finished falling to the floor, the boy looked over at Neon who could only shrug. I didn't think anyone was around. Otherwise, I'd have chosen a different sound. What? What did you say? I can't hear you. There's ringing in my ears. Double sorry, Neon said as she ran off down the street. Damn. I hope I don't get penalized for that. I should just stick to my bass bubbles instead. Kaboom, kaboom, kaboom. Neon veered around the corner just to see Katsuki explode 3 robots' heads off. He scoffed when he saw her. Ah, too slow. I got to it first, he laughed. I'm at 43 already. You. A pit dropped in Neon's stomach. 4. She muttered. Katsuki seemed quite pleased with her low number and he laughed heartily before shooting off into the distance. His voice trailed off as he left and Neon looked in the direction he ran. At this point her legs were burning and her entire body was drenched in sweat but she knew she couldn't stop. This encounter with the noisy boy was the fuel that she very much needed. Alright. Time to get serious, Neon said as she crossed her arms over her chest, gathering her bubbles around her body. Let's do this. She ran through the streets with newfound fervor, not even stopping when villains come out of the woodwork towards her. She just pointed at them, sent a bass bubble and snapped. She didn't look at their numbers or if she had taken it away from anybody. She didn't even bother counting how many villains she attacked. All she knew was that she had to keep running because every second that she paused was a second an opportunity for a point would be taken away. Her bubbles were dwindling and when she was left with only 2 bass bubbles and a group of untouched high-pitched bubbles, that was when the ground started to tremble. Neon stumbled to a halt in order to regain her balance and she looked around her. There were several people nearby and they looked just as bewildered as she did on what was happening. Suddenly the buildings ahead of them exploded, creating clouds of dust and debris. The cloud of dust grew closer and closer as sounds of explosion and heavy machinery drew closer and closer. One by one the buildings in front of Neon started to crumble and through the dust, she could see the silhouette of a robot villain bigger and taller than most of the buildings in the city. That's the obstacle. The 0.1, someone shouted as everyone began to run away. 2 minutes. It's closing in. Shit. Somebody help me, someone screamed somewhere in the dust cloud. Neon bolted towards the sound as she threw her arm over her nose to avoid breathing in too much of the dust. In the distance she could see the silhouette of someone on the ground. As she got closer, she saw a boy clutching his ankle and stretching out his hand towards her. Please help. I twisted my ankle trying to get away, he cried. Here. Lean on me, Neon said as she went over to him, hooked his arm over her neck and stumbled forward. The dust was getting thicker and she could hear the rumblings of the 0 point getting closer but she couldn't move as fast as she did before. She was getting tired and no sort of mental motivation could help her at this point. Come on. It's getting closer, the guy whined. I'm trying. Neon said as the ground beneath her feet began to shake. Ugh. It's hard to move fast with all this dust. Okay. Bear with me, cover your ears. What? The guy asked. Snap. Pop. A pink bubble burst, letting out a high-frequency tone that sent the dust flying away from them and clearing their vision just as the shadow of the 0 point fell right over them. Neon and the guy both turned to see that the 0 point obstacle was only a few feet away. Ah! Neon and the guy screamed. There you are. What? Suddenly, a familiar white adhesive curled around Neon and the boy, pinning them to each other. Hang on! Yelled the flat-faced boy with the tape as he pulled the pair towards him. He stood on a rooftop out of range of the 0 point's destructive path, and the pair were flung onto the roof just as the 0 point trampled through where they were originally standing. Thanks. I owe you one, Neon said as she tried to sit up, but since she was pinned to the other guy, who seemed to have no inclination of changing his state of being flat, it proved most difficult. I'm alive, I'm alive. The guy wept as pools of tears formed beneath his face. Goss! Neon shouted as the pool inched towards her and she wriggled her whole body like a worm. Get me out of here. Sorry, the tape guy said with a grin as he ripped the tape with his bare hands, and Neon rolled as far away as she could. I saw you run back in there and I would have retrieved you guys sooner, but with the dust cloud and everything dash. No need to explain. You saved us. Plain and simple. Neon sighed and rubbed her neck. Ugh. I'm tired. I don't even know if I can walk out of here, let alone take the written exam. If you are this beat, why did you even run in to save this guy? The tape guy laughed. Well, I didn't know I was this tired until now, Neon snapped. Besides, I heard him, and I just reacted. Why does it matter? We survived, didn't we? Good point, the tape guy said, and he stuck out his hand towards Neon. I'm Zero Hanta. Neon looked at the traces of cuts along his hand. She winced before taking it. Nishiyama. Neon, were those from the glass earlier? Hanta laughed and placed his free hand on his hip. Don't worry about it. Time's up. Present Mike announced, and Neon's shoulders slumped. It's over, finally, she sighed. My name is Mamoru Junko, if anybody was wondering, said the boy who needed to be saved. -1 week later. 56 Akias, 57 Akias, 58 Akias, Neon grunted as she slowly did one-handed push-ups while her sister sat cross-legged on her back. Go Nechan. Go. Akia giggled. Ever since the entrance exam, Neon worked out and trained like a demon possessed. The practical exam was a rude awakening to her just how much she lacked in terms of stamina and strength. Everything in her life became solely focused on strengthening her body, including her usual playtime with her little sister. Thankfully, whatever Akia wished for, Akia received, so when she asked for a private gym that could be connected to her room, their father had it done and finished by the next day. It came equipped with all the bells and whistles, which included a boxing ring. Hand-drawn motivational posters hung around the wall with Akia's words of encouragement written out in colorful markers, while TV screens that lined the room flashed footage and news clips of professional heroes in action. 59 As. Neon groaned as she struggled to get back up from the floor. Beads of sweat poured down her face and dripped onto the mat. She drew in a breath and started to lower herself again. 68 dash. Thump. Thump. Neon. Your dash. Splat. Neon completely collapsed onto the floor with her face mushing into the pool of her own sweat while her hands splayed out on the sides. Akia rolled off her sister's back and giggled at her older brother, who had knocked on the door and stuck his head in. What the hell do you want, Kosher? Neon sighed as she flopped on her back and stared up at him. Kosher was just a younger version of their father in every sense, at least to Neon. Both were just selfish and entitled men that would do anything for a good deal. They cared more about what was in the accounting books than what was happening around them. Please watch your tone, Neon. I have done nothing to deserve such dash, Kosher started to say, but then Neon sat up and folded her arms. He cleared his throat and pulled out an envelope from his inner jacket pocket and held it out. The mail just came in and this was addressed to you, from Yue. Both girls hurriedly got to their feet as Neon grabbed the envelope from his hands. It was a small envelope with a red wax seal stamped with the Yue logo on it. Neon sucked in a breath as she felt the thickness of the envelope. Open it. Open it. Akia shouted as she bounced on her feet. It's thin? Neon gulped. Wouldn't an acceptance letter have more paperwork for orientation? Well, if you do get rejected, I'm sure there is still time for me to call the Board of Education at Sangri Dash. Neon glared at her brother. I already said I'm not going to whatever uppity private school we have connections with. Could you at least pretend that you believe in me? Pretend that there's actually some warmth running through your cold blood. Kushi sighed. I didn't say you didn't get in, Neon. I'm just saying if you didn't dash. Please don't fight. Neon inhaled sharply as she looked down at her sister, who had her head hung low and big, fat tears plopping down at her feet. Please don't fight. Akia pleaded as she rubbed her eyes with the back of her arm. I don't like it when you two fight. Neon rolled her eyes at how statue-like Kosher seemed to be at the moment, and then she knelt to the ground and wrapped her arms around Akia. I'm sorry for upsetting you, Akia. The fight's over. We're not fighting anymore. Right, Kosher? I certainly wasn't the one who was combative. Neon gritted her teeth and forced a smile. See, Akia? No fighting. Now, should we open the envelope? Akia nodded against Neon's shoulder, and then she lifted her head up to beam at her older sister. I'm sure you got in, Nechan. You can do anything. Neon chuckled as she sat down on the floor and had Akia sit in her lap. Neon gingerly ripped the edges of the envelope and then tilted the opening into her open hand. 2 folded sheets of paper followed by a small metal disc fell into her palm. Akia whispered as she lifted up the metal disc. What's this? State-of-the-art projection disc, Kosher said with an approved nod. Impressive technology. It'll activate when it's set down on a flat surface. Huh? Akia asked. Put it on the floor, Akia, Neon said with an exasperated look to her brother. Geez. Akia's 5, not 25. Here it goes. Akia said and laid the disc right by Neon's feet. A beam of light came out from the disc and suddenly, a large toothy smile was projected above the desk. I am here as a projection, came a boisterous voice. All Might. Akia squealed as she leaned forward in her sister's lap to get a better look. What is All Might doing in an UA admittance video? Neon asked. Yes, it is true. I have taken a position as a teacher at UA. All Might laughed as he placed a hands on his hips. But let us get to the matter at hand. Nishiyama Neon. Let's see how you did. He turned his back to the camera and suddenly the camera shifted to side and a new screen appeared beside All Might, showing Neon's name above the words Villain Points. Based on your practical exam, you were able to accumulate 18 villain points, All Might announced. The numbers 18 flashed under the villain points and it made Neon's stomach tighten. That wasn't even half of what Noisy Guy got in the first 5 minutes of the exam. But the practical exam was not just about that. No, All Might grinned. Huh. The screen changed to replay the footage of Neon rushing into the dust cloud and then being lifted out with Junko. Is that the guy you saved, Nechan? Akia asked excitedly, having forced Neon to recount her exam multiple times in the past week. Tried to save, Neon corrected, but yes. The entrance exam was not graded solely on villain points, All Might announced. How can a hero course reject people who save others and do the right thing? No. In fact, there was another grade to this exam. The words rescue points flashed next to villain points. Rescue points? All Might announced. They're given by a panel of judges that reviewed any heroic or rescue action done throughout the course of the exam. It's the other basic ability we at UA looked at. Nishiyama Neon, despite the fact that you did not successfully save the young boy on your own, you still rushed in at the first sign of trouble instinctively, and a hero needs that. You've been awarded? Neon sucked in a breath. 13 points. Neon's shoulders slumped. That's only a total of 31. Shit. To be perfectly frank, All Might said, your points barely put you in the top 40. The chart changed to the top 10 names and Neon's heart sank when she saw that the best score was 77. Neon groaned. It's over. I failed. However, All Might said, there was another exam result I have yet to mention. The written exam. Neon gulped as All Might grinned at the screen and gave a thumbs up to the screen. Nishiyama Neon are number 1. Neon blinked as her name appeared on a whole new top 10 chart and her name was sandwiched between 2 numbers 1 and 100. That's right. For the first time in the 10 years, we have an examinee obtain a perfect score on the written exam. All Might shouted, yes. It is important for a hero to act and be strong, but it is also essential for a hero to think critically and be as knowledgeable as possible. What? Because who knows what kind of detail could come of use one day in saving someone's life or to thwart a villain's ploy. And with that kind of showing, it definitely means. No way. Neon whispered. Nishiyama Neon. All Might managed to roar through his brilliant smile. Nechan. Akia gasped as she clutched Neon's hands. You, pass. This door is huge. What could possibly be the reason for such a tall door? Are the teachers here all 14 feet tall pro heroes? Do we have someone in our class who is that huge? Why is it this tall? Is this even necessary? Neon stood in front of the door for an inordinate amount of time with her head leaned way back so she could see the top of it. It had 1A painted on it, so there was no mistaking that this was her class. She was supposed to be in on the other side of the door, but she just couldn't get past it. The mystery of the door size was too captivating. Ahem. Tenya coughed next to her before reaching over and opening the door himself. Nishiyama-sen, we cannot dawdle especially on the first day of class. Yeah. Was all Neon could say back as she begrudgingly followed him into the classroom. A loose cluster of floating sound bubbles trailed behind her. On instinct, Neon's eyes immediately went to locate all the nearest exits and entry points. Her hand twitched for a second and she had to consciously stop herself from moving at least a sound bubble at every corner. Then she assessed the occupants in the room. Despite them arriving an hour early to campus, given Tenya's insistence of having ample time to familiarize himself with the school grounds, they managed to get to the class 15 minutes before class was about to start. Given that Neon was used to arriving whenever, she was privately surprised by how many people had already arrived and settled in their seats. There were 5 rows of 4 with an extra seat in the back by itself an equal distance between the back door and the window. Most of the seats had already been filled up, which Neon didn't have much qualms about since the seat were assigned anyways. Everyone who had been talking silenced immediately and stared at Neon and Tenya. Some of them looked genuinely curious while others looked either bored or solemn. I guess people really do take class seriously around here, she thought as she watched Tenya march to the front of the room and bow. He placed one hand on his chest and another hand chopped forward. Hello. I am Ida Tenya. I look forward to sharing our educational experience together, he announced. Then he looked at his orientation packet and he nodded. Yes, I am in seat 4, which would be. It's over here. Behind me, said a girl with the largest and roundest eyes Neon had ever seen. Nice to meet you, Ida-kun. My name is Azui Tsuyu, but call me Tsu. Ah, thank you, Tsu-chan. Tenya said and marched over to his new desk, the first seat of the 4th row. He set his backpack down and then realized that Neon was still by the door. Ah, Nishiyama-san. What about you? Wait, Nishiyama? A girl sitting near the back of the class sat up a little straighter to get a better look at Neon. She had her long black hair tied into a spiky ponytail. She smiled brightly at Neon, who noticed that her voice had a musical lull to her tonality, as in the Nishiyama conglomerate. Are you part of that family? Neon's lips pursed ever so slightly as she snapped her fingers. Guilty as charged. Tenya jutted his hands forward. Nishiyama-san. I hope you got enough rest and didn't stay up too late watching old cop shows. We must be at peak physical condition for class. A school of this caliber will definitely push us to our limits every day. Neon shrugged her shoulders. What could she do? Akia was in the mood to watch some crime-fighting movies last night. The girl got to her feet and walked over to Neon just as a boy with short orangey blonde hair and a black lightning-shaped streak did the same. Ooh, do those sounds come for your bubbles? He asked as he moved a finger towards a green-tinted balloon that was about the size of a basketball. Yo-ui, please put your hands behind your head and step away from the vehicle. The boy threw both hands in the air and jumped away. Sorry. I just wanted to hear another sound, he said, and then he grinned at Neon. I'm Kaminari Denki. Maybe we can grab a bite after class and talk more about these bubbles. That is a negative, sir. Denki's face turned bright red while the other students stifled a laugh. Don't touch the bubbles, Neon warned. You could accidentally trigger a chain reaction if you aren't careful and hurt everyone. Oh, so you can talk. Denki laughed. Neon shrugged. Why waste my breath when I already have sound bites that can do it for me? I'm Yaoyorozu Momo, the girl said with a small nod. I believe our father plays golf together in Hawaii. You are their eldest daughter, Nishiyama Neon-san, correct? Yeah, Neon said with a tilt of her head. I remember your name too. My mother paid your family a visit in London for tea once. Momo's eyes lit up. Oh yes, that was over 7 years ago. I completely forgot about that. Neon shrugged. I never forget what I hear. Hawaii? London? Denki gasped. What kind of rich lives do you two lead? I come from a family of heroes, Momo said with a slight blush, but it is nothing compared to the wealth and influence of the Nishiyama family. Neon winced. We own land. That's all. Where's your seat? Momo asked. Neon showed her the paper. Oh, seat 16, HRMM? I believe. Momo said as she turned to face the back of the class, and then she did a quick count in her head. Yes, it's the last table in the back. Near me. She walked Neon to her desk and Neon smiled just a little. Best desk spot. Yes. Nishiyama. You're in this class too. The classroom door slid open and Siro came walking in with a big grin on his face. Thanks to you, I got a great score in my practical exam. I'm sure you did too. How many rescue points did you get? Enough to get me here, Neon replied as she slid her headphones over her ears and started to play music on her phone. Oh, I guess the conversation is over? Zero said as he scratched the back of his head. Ah, you made it. I can't believe they'd let someone like you pass. The voice made Neon flinch more than the words, and she grimaced when she saw the noisy boy coming at her with a finger directed at her face. She pushed her headphones down and raised her hand. Snap. Before he could even say anything, a bubble formed around his head and drowned out whatever outburst he was about to spew. Good morning to you too, noisy boy, Neon muttered. His face was getting redder with every unheard word sprouting out of his lips, and his hands moved to pop the bubble around his head, but no matter how hard he pressed, the bubble would not pop. He then decided to sprint towards Neon but was quickly held back by Denki and Zero. Nishiyama, I think you should let him go. He looks like his whole head is about to explode, Denki suggested as he struggled to rein Katsuki in. You shouldn't be using your quirk without a teacher present anyways, Tenya said, who walked over to her desk. You might get in trouble. That made Neon sit up and she held up her hand. Fine. Snap. The fuck do you think you're doing, you fucking low-life die job? I will kill you. Katsuki screamed with his hands outstretched towards Neon. Wow. The mouth on this one, Denki whistled. Is this truly the words of someone aspiring to become a hero? Tenya asked. Shut up, you stupid side characters. Snap. Suddenly, a bubble ballooned out over Neon's entire desk as she closed her eyes, pulled her headphones back over her ears and listened to her music. From outside the bubble, everyone could see but not hear the long breath of content that Neon exhaled. She bubbled herself? Denki asked, incredulously. Stupid die job. Come out of there so I can crush you. Katsuki yelled. Give up. I don't think she can hear you, Zero said and placed a hand on Katsuki's shoulder, who immediately shrugged it off and stormed away looking for his desk. Don't touch me, he snapped. Momo looked up at the ceiling where the other sound bubbles retreated to and then back at the bubble that wrapped around Neon. She lightly touched the bubble and was surprised to find that it had a strong elasticity to it. It seems Nishiyama-san can produce two different types of bubbles. One that stores sound and one that can confine it. And the texture of this type is less delicate than the type Nishiyama-san warned Kaminari-san not to touch. What an unique quirk. You're very observant, Yaoruzo-san, Tenya said with an approving nod. Most people just assume it's the same type of bubble. I, myself, had to experience it a few times myself to put it together. You and Nishiyama are pretty close, huh? Zero asked. Tenya gasped and his angular arms began to chop the air randomly. I would not be so bold as to say that we are friends, but indeed, Nishiyama-san and I have a long history and are well acquainted with each other. Another boy entered the room. This one had hair that was red on the left and white on the right. He also had a red burn mark around his right eye. He looked down at the piece of paper in his hand and then walked down the room towards Neon's desk. He stopped right in front of the group and stared at them for an uncomfortably long time before speaking in a low voice. You're in my way. Huh? Denki and Zero said. The boy held up his paper. Seat 15. Indeed this is your desk. Tenya shouted as he hurriedly leapt out of the way and gave the boy a small bow. I sincerely apologize. We are blocking your path. The group dispersed and the boy pulled out his chair. He stopped short when his hand bumped into Neon's bubble. There were still a few inches he had to pull out to actually sit at his desk. He looked over at Neon, who was looking at something on her phone, blatantly tuning the world out. Doc. He hit his knuckles against the bubble to get her attention. It worked, but then she raised her phone. Snap. Click. She released her bubble and took a picture of the boy at the same time. If the boy was surprised, angered, or even confused by her behavior, his expression did not show it. Why'd you take my picture? He finally asked after staring at her for a bit. Inspiration, Neon said. For what? My next hair color, Neon said and straightened out some of her hair for him to see. I dyed this myself, but I'm thinking about changing it. Did you dye that or is it natural? He stared at her coldly, giving her enough time to take in that one of his eyes was blue, and then he sat down with his back to her. I was born this way. Don't put your feet on the desk. Don't you find that disrespectful to the upperclassmen that had that seat and to the craftsman that made this desk? Neon leaned to the side so she could see what was happening near the front of the room and she groaned. Tenya was in the middle of lecturing Katsuki for resting his feet on the desk. It was like her worst nightmares had come together. Loud and aggressive combined with long and arduous. Nope. What junior high did you go to crawl out of anyways, you side character? Katsuki sneered. Oh, Tenya said as he put a hand to his chest and stuck out a hand. I attended semi-private academy. My name is Tenya Ida. Samai? Katsuki scoffed. So you're a damn elite, huh? Suddenly the sneer left Katsuki's face as someone at the door caught his eye. Tenya followed the eye line and he too looked surprised. You? It was the curly-haired boy that was whispering to Katsuki during the presentation. With all eyes in the room now fully on him, his face turned red and he grabbed the straps of his backpack. Oh, it's the fanboy, Neon said, and when the boy's eyes met hers, he visibly blanched. Tenya charged forward. Good morning. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Dash. I heard, the curly-haired boy said, quickly recovering his senses so that he could take a step back and clear some space between him and Tenya. I'm Midoriya Izuku. Nice to meet you, Ida-kun. Midoriya-kun, you realized there was something more to that practical exam, didn't you? I had no idea. I hate to admit it, but you are better than me. I have misjudged you, Tenya said, and Neon rested her hand on her chin. Did that boy save someone during the practical exams? Oh, that curly hair. You're the plain-looking one, a girl exclaimed from behind Midoriya. Midoriya turned and revealed a girl with a bob similar to Neon's, except hers was longer in the front and she was a natural brunette. You passed, she said with relief, just like President Mike said. Of course you did. Your punch was amazing. The girl started to jump up and down, throwing her fist in the air, and Neon put a little bit more weight on her hand as she observed them a little more. The girl had a childlike quality in her voice. She couldn't help but think that if used properly, that voice could be quite consoling to children during times of crisis. Midoriya turned a deep shade of red, which the girl seemed not to notice as she continued to jump in place. Oh, well, it was thanks to you going to speak with him directly that Dash, he stammered. Go somewhere else if you want to play and make friends. A low voice drawled out from outside the room. This is the hero course. From her seat, Neon couldn't see who was talking, but whoever it was, they were either really short or laying flat on the ground, judging by the angle of Tenya, Midoriya, and the girl's eyeline. Okay, it took 8 seconds for you kids to be quiet. Time is limited. You are not rational enough, the voice said as Neon heard something unzip, and suddenly, whoever was speaking stepped into the room. I'm your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa, he said. Nice to meet you. Eh? The entire room gasped at that admission, but he seemed unfazed by their reaction. He reached into the yellow sleeping bag he had in his hand and took out a blue tracksuit with red and white marks. Neon knew that all teachers at UA were pro-heroes, but this one certainly didn't look like any hero she had ever seen. He had scraggly, unkempt black hair that went to his shoulders and even down his face, which was mostly covered by the beige scarf that wrapped around his neck and shoulders over a black slouchy sweater. The most she could see from his face was that he had a pale complexion that was almost sickly. Considering he spoke slowly and monotonously, she could only wonder if he was getting enough sleep. It's kind of sudden, but you should all have been assigned one of these. Put them on and meet me on the field, he instructed. With that and no other information, he turned on his feet and walked off. What? What was that? Katsuki demanded. Is that guy really going to be our teacher? I guess we need to go change and get to the field, Midoriya said. But where are the locker rooms? I don't even know where the field is. Denki shouted. Actually, Nishiyama-san and I took the liberty of getting here early this morning in order to familiarize ourselves with the facilities. Tenya started to say, and Neon immediately jumped up to cut him off. We know the way, Neon said. Guys, go with Ida-kun. Girls, come with me. Yes, precisely. Thank you, Nishiyama-san. The class made their way down to the locker rooms and changed into the blue tracksuits with streaks of white at the front that formed the letters UA. With the boys making up the majority of the class, Neon noticed the girls that she didn't get a chance to before. One girl that really caught her eye was a girl that was completely pink from head to toe except for the yellow in her eyes and antennae like horns. Hey, Neon said to the girl when they were all finished getting dressed, and then held up her phone. Would you mind if I took a picture of you? My sister's favorite color is pink and I think she'd really like your look. Oh, me? The girl replied with a bright smile. She leaned back and posed with her hand on her hip. Sure. I'm Ishido Mina, by the way. You're Nishiyama-san, right? Click. Thanks and yes. Can I call you Mina? Neon asked. I like the sound of it better than Ishido. Mina looked. Yeah, sure. Oh, we should take a picture of you then, the brunette girl said as she held out her own phone. I'm sure your sister would love to see you in your new gym uniform. Here. I'll take a picture and send it to you. No. It's fine, Neon said. Just Mina is enough. It wasn't that Neon didn't want the picture to be taken. She knew for sure Akia would want to see that, but it was more of the fact that she didn't want to share her contact information with anyone. She could ask to have the photo taken on her own phone, but that seemed too much of a hassle. I'm Uraraka Achiko, the girl said with a smile. I think it's really sweet that you share photos with your little sister. How old is she? She's 5, Neon said, and then her eyes drifted upwards. Uraraka, Ochako, Chiro. I think I like Achiko better. Can I call you Achiko? Achiko's smile did not move a muscle. Yeah. Makes us sound like we're close friends already. May I call you Neon-chan then? No, Neon said flatly, and Achiko looked taken aback. I don't like the sound of it. Just Neon is fine. Oh, I see, Achiko said as her smile slowly returned to her face. I'm Jiro Kyoka, said a girl with earlobes shaped like long audio jacks. She had a smirk on her face and her thumb jutted towards her own face. Which of my names sounds better to you? Neon looked the girl up and down. Jiro sounds better. That's fine, Jiro said with a grin, and then she twirled one of her earlobes around her finger. I have a sound base Quirk too. You can store sound, right? That's pretty cool. I can also amplify and dampen. Neon said. Nice, Jiro said. Looks like we have similar quirks. We could work well together. Or terribly against each other, Neon thought to herself, but she kept her mouth shut. Instead, she looked over at the clock hanging above the door. I think we should head out. We don't want to be late. Oh right, Achiko said as she hurriedly put her things away and stuffed them in a locker. The girls headed out to the field just as the boys arrived as well. Their teacher stood at the edge of track with his arms crossed. He waited for them all to settle down and he took in a deep breath. All right. Today we will be doing a quirk assessment test. A quirk assessment test? The class asked. But what about the entrance ceremony? Or our orientation? Achiko exclaimed. Their teacher sighed. If you're going to become a hero, you don't have time for such leisurely events. UA's selling point is how unrestricted its school traditions are, he said. That's also how the teachers run their classes. He pulled out a device and showed them a list on the screen. Softball throw, long jump, 50m dash, long run, grip test, high jump, seat oops, side steps. You guys did this in junior high, yes? Physical fitness tests where you weren't allowed to use your quirks? He asked. The country still uses averages taken from results from students not using their quirks. It's not rational. Well, the Ministry of Education is procrastinating. He took a step back. Bakugo, you finished at the top of the practical exam, right? Neon clenched her fists. So Noisy Boy got 77 points. Shit. I'm never telling him my score. In junior high, what was your best result for the softball throw? Aizawa asked. Oh, 67 meters, Ketsuki replied. Then, try doing it with your quirk, Aizawa said and handed him a ball. You can do whatever you want as long as you stay in the circle. Hurry up, give it all you got. Katsuki's eyes lit up as he stepped into the circle marked on the ground. He stretched his arms and bent his legs. He wound his arm back from the pitch and then he gritted his teeth. Dai, he screamed as he launched the ball with an explosive blast from his hands. Neon tilted her head. D? The ball sailed high up into the air with fire streaking behind it and it disappeared from everyone's vision. It's important to know your own maximum first. That is the most rational way to form the foundation of a hero, Aizawa said as the ball fell to the ground and he tracked the distance with the device in his hand. He held up the screen for all to see. 705.2 meters? The class exclaimed as Katsuki puffed up his chest. What's this? It looks fun. Mina looked. We can use our quirks as much as we want. Hanta cheered. That's going to make a world of difference. I'm pumped. Fun, huh? Aizawa sighed. You have 3 years to become a hero. Will you have an attitude like that the whole time? That won't do. A malicious grin formed on their teacher's face. All right. Let's raise the stakes then. Whoever comes in last place in all 8 tests will be judged to have no potential and will be punished with expulsion. Are you kidding? A boy with spiky red hair shouted. We just got through the exam. Why should we be tested again? Expelled? On the first day of school? Ocheko exclaimed, No. Even if it wasn't the first day of school, this is too unfair. Aizawa chuckled. Welcome to the UA Hero course. Natural disasters, crisis, crimes, we cannot control when these things happen. Life is unfair. Heroes are the ones who reverse those situations. If you came here thinking it would be just a normal day at school, too bad. For the next 3 years, UA will do all it can to give you one hardship after another. Go beyond, plus ultra. Neon closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Why couldn't they just evaluate her for her? Why does she have to be compared to others? She had bit the bullet and gone through the entrance exam process because it was necessary and that was what she had to do to get in. She also knew that would naturally be a competitive spirit in the course. She just didn't expect it to start on the very first day of school. But this is what she signed up for and she had to see it through. No matter what. No matter how many new sound or experiences Neon records for her sister, she knew it would never be good as the real thing. All the things she's done in the past to make Akia's days bearable, if not bright, were all trivial and temporary fixes. This will definitely help open the door for both of them. Alright, demonstration's over. Let's get started, Aizawa said and walked towards the track. First test. 50-Meter Dash. Neon shot a jealous look at Tenya's calves as they got in line by their seat number. If only I had a physical quirk, she thought as she crossed her arms and thought about how she would use her quirk to her advantage. They raced two at a time with Tenya going first along with a girl with a long tongue. He streaked through using the engines in his calves in 3 seconds while the girl frog jumped through in a little under 6 seconds. By being the first pair to go, they set the bar very high. When it got to Neon's turn, she stepped up next to the boy with red and white hair. She waved her hand down and 3 blue-tinted bubbles, each the size of a grapefruit, came floating towards her. They lined down her back but an inch apart. Here goes nothing. Ready? Aizawa called. Set? Go. Beep. As soon as he blew his whistle, Neon jumped up and snapped her fingers. Pop. Wub 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 wub. The sound wave propelled her forward but barely a third of the way. She knew it wouldn't clear the full way, but just as she was about to snap her fingers to break the next bubble, the track next to her was covered in ice and the boy slid right across to the finish line. Beep. 5.4 seconds, the monitoring robot reported. Without hesitation, Neon put one foot on the ice path and snapped her fingers. Pop. E. The class covered their ears and winced as Neon skated forward to the finish line with one foot. Beep. 6.3 seconds. The boy in red and white hair was blinked at her at the finish line and she flashed a thumb up sign to him. Thanks for the boost. Nishiyama. Aizawa called out. Neon closed her eyes and sighed. Crap. Yes, sensei? I said to use your own quirk. It doesn't count if you use Todoroki's. Do it again. But dash. Do it again or else I'll put you on the bottom for this test, Aizawa said and Neon gulped. Neon sighed and got back to the starting line. She motioned for more bubbles to come down and then waited for the whistle. Go. Pop. Oh, we're not gonna take it / no, we ain't gonna take it. Pop. Baby shark / do 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 / baby shark / do 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 do. Pop. Beep. 7.5 seconds. At the last bubble, everyone had hit the floor with the lifelike quality of the machine gun sound effects and they all looked incredulously at Neon. There were some teachers and students that even poked their head out of their classroom windows in alarm. Everything good out there? Present Mike screamed down. Yeah. Sorry about the interruption, Aizawa said and he then turned to stare stonily at Neon, who winced and put up her hands. Sorry? Nishiyama, no more gun sound effects. Not just in school but for any public space, Aizawa said. Yes, sensei. The fitness test progressed without incident but that was mostly because Neon was out of saved sound bubbles. At least, ones that could help her anyways. She couldn't use her quirk to help her with grip strength, side steps, or even the long jump. The more tests they went through, the heavier the realization that she was near the middle if not the bottom of the class in terms of physicality. Sure, she was pretty limber and had better than average scores for a girl her age but she wasn't here to be average. She was here to be a hero. She was definitely having some doubts about her own abilities and her place in this class but Neon knew this was something she needed to shake off. This was for Akia. Her own feelings be damned. Nishiyama. You're up. Yes, sensei, Neon mumbled as she took a softball from the teacher and weighed in her hands. She put her finger to throat and then snapped her fingers. She didn't throw the ball. Instead, she merely bounced it in her hand and when it was level to her lips, she let out a booming roar. I'm going to be a hero whether I like it or not. The trees that lined the other end of the field swayed by the force and the ball dropped in front of them. Beep. 432 meters, the device read. Don't you mean, whether you like it or not, Nishiyama-san? Midoriya asked with a perplexed look. Yeah, sure, Neon replied as she stuffed her hands in her pockets. Oh, Nishiyama. Aizawa said slowly, a hero is a person with conviction. During a time of hardship, people look to heroes for guidance and hope. Any signs of wavering or doubt will only breed panic and discord. You need to know exactly who you are and what you stand for. If you cannot do that even now, then you can just leave this class as there are many of your peers who can and do. Do not waste our time. Neon sighed and the class balked at the clear disgruntlement on her face. This could end up into a philosophical discussion that she really did not want to waste her breath on, but it was obvious she needed to give him an answer or else she'd seriously be on the chopping block. Well, she thought to herself, I might as well make myself heard now. I know who I am, sensei, Neon said. I'm Nishiyama Neon. I like to do things my way. I dislike being pitted against or compared to other. I find that competition does nothing but raise hostility and unneeded self-doubt. I also dislike following orders blindly. I'm not a robot. But most of all, I dislike it when people wait for others to do something they are just as capable of doing themselves. I am not the type to wait around for someone else to save the day. I'm also a person with conviction. I believe there will be a day, maybe several, when someone will need my help. That is why I'm here. To get the skills and experience I need to help. Even if it means shouldering the burden of being a hero. There was a long, drawn-out moment of silence with Neon and her sensei just staring solemnly at each other, mentally sizing the other one up. I see, Aizawa finally drawled out and then moved his eyes over to the class. Hagakure, you're up. Neon shuffled to the back of the group. There were several eyes on her but she ignored them and stared up at the sky. Normally, she'd be skipping class and walking down a street somewhere in the city either listening to music or just trying to find something interesting to record for Akia. She couldn't wait to get her hands on her headphones and just drown out the noise. Yeah, I'll be a hero, whether I like it or not. Are you worried about how you're doing, Nishiyama-san? Momo asked. The girl asked in such a delicate manner but it still made Neon shift away from her as a knee-jerk reaction. She had been too lost in her thoughts to even notice that Momo had come to stand next to her. Ah, Neon slowly admitted. Momo gave a hopeful smile. It's true you weren't able to use your quirk to enhance yourself physically at every test, but that was the case for several others as well, myself included. I think you should be safe. Thanks, Neon said, feeling her spirits slightly lifted by her classmates' words. Would you mind if I called you Momo? Your last name is a mouthful. Momo giggled. Not at all. In turn, may I call you Neon then? Neon shrugged. Sure. Momo's smile grew a bit bigger but then it wavered a little when she saw who was heading up for the ball toss. Oh, she whispered. To be honest, I am more worried about Midoriya-san. HRM? He hasn't used his quirk at all, Momo said in a hushed whisper. Of course he hasn't, Katsuki laughed, catching wind of their conversation. He's a quirkless scum. What? Neon asked as Tenya also turned to Katsuki in surprise. Quirkless? That can't be possible. Did you not know what he did at the practical exam? Tenya asked. Huh. Now it was Katsuki's turn to be at a loss. I've been so focused on my own results that I didn't really notice how everybody else did, Neon confessed, and then she winced when she saw how badly Midoriya was sweating out on the field. He looks nervous. Really nervous. As Midoriya drew back his arm, Neon could see red sparks that seemed to grow and sparkle up his arm like veins or circuits, but as he was just about to release the ball, it disappeared completely and the ball flopped to the ground in a pitiful fashion. Beep. 45 meters. How is that possible? Midoriya gasped as he turned to look at his teacher. The scarf around Aizawa's neck had come loose and it was floating around him like a sentient being. The teacher's hair was also floating straight up and his eyes glowed red as they pierced directly into Midoriya's. I erased your quirk, Aizawa said. The entrance exam is not rational enough if even a kid like you can get in. You erased my quirk? Midoriya repeated and then he took a step back. Those goggles around your neck. I recognize them. You can erase other people's quirks with your quirk just by looking at them. The Erasure Hero, Eraser Head. Eraser? The class asked as they looked at one another to see if anyone else recognized that name. Eraser Head is an underground hero, Neon said. I've heard 2 news stories about him before but nothing recent. He's not in the media much. From what I can tell, you can't control your quirk, can you? Aizawa asked Midoriya. Do you intend to become incapacitated again and have someone save you? That's not my intention. Midoriya shouted. Aizawa's scarf stretched forward and grabbed Midoriya, pulling him to his teacher. They were far enough away that the rest of the class couldn't hear what the teacher had to say but Neon could. Every word as if they were speaking directly in front of her. Whatever your intention, I'm saying that's what those around you will be forced to do, Aizawa said. In the past, there was an oppressively passionate hero who saved over 1,000 people by himself and created a legend. Even if you have the same reckless valor, you'll just be decked and turned into a useless doll after saving one person. Midoriya, with your power, you can't become a hero. His scarf fell limp again and his head lowered. I've returned your quirk, Aizawa said. You have 2 turns for the ball throw. Hurry up and get it over with. Midoriya stepped back to the circle and he started to mumble to himself. Neon found herself intrigued by this development. Was he actually quirkless as Noisy Boy said, or was it as the teacher said? Did he have such a powerful quirk that if he used it, it would cause a huge blowback for him? After a long moment of thinking, Midoriya drew back his arm one more time and he threw the ball with all his might. This time, Neon saw no red sparks, but something definitely happened because the ball practically rocketed out into the sky. Smarayas! Midoriya yelled. Beep. 705.3 meters. Sensei said as he shakily lifted his arm and clenched his fist. I can still move. Neon stared hard at his fist. One of his fingers was definitely discolored. Blowback? What is the meaning of this? Neon stifled a groan and resorted to covering her ears with her hands as Katsuki stormed to with his hand outstretched. Tell me what's going on, Deku, you bastard. Katsuki screamed, but before he could get close enough to he was pulled back by their teacher's scarf. What the dash? This cloth is hard. They're weapons for capture made of carbon fiber woven together with metal wire made of a special alloy, Aizawa said, and he scowled. Geez. Don't keep making me use my quirk over and over. Neon's eyebrow raised. Is there side effects from using his quirk too much? I have naturally dry eyes, Aizawa said point blank, and it made Neon stagger a little. That's it? He released his student and shook his head. All right. Everybody, let's move on to the next test. The rest of the day progressed without any more hiccups, and Neon discovered that she had a lot more stamina than most people in her class during the long endurance run. She chalked it up to all of the running around she did, collecting audio samples all across the country, as well as chasing after Akia around in the gardens when she was at home. But then again, she had also grown up learning basic self-defense and how to efficiently escape. Okay? Let me announce the results, Aizawa said. The total is simply the marks you got from each test. It's a waste of time to explain verbally, so I'll show you the results all at once. He pressed a button and the results flashed as a projection in front of him. Neon's throat tightened the further her eyes went down the list. Nishiyama Neon, 15. She closed her eyes and her shoulders slumped down with relief. Close one. The projection disappeared and Aizawa put the device back in his pocket. By the way, I was lying about the expulsion. Neon's eyes widened and her eyebrows almost flew off her head. It was a rational deception to draw out the upper limits of your quirks, Aizawa said with a laid-back smile. Wait! The class gasped while started to wobble. Of course it was a lie. Momo sighed. It was obvious if you think about it. I didn't notice, the rest of the class gasped while Neon only frowned and looked skeptically at her teacher. She thought she had a pretty good sense when someone was lying, and it really did not sound like a lie to her. Well, we're done here, Aizawa said as he started to walk back to the school building. There's a couple of handouts in the classroom about the curriculum, so when you get back, look over them. Dismissed. Midoriya. Go to the nurse's office to get yourself fixed. Tomorrow will be packed with even more rigorous tests. The more she watched Aizawa, the more confused she felt about what he said about expulsion. Without hesitation, she started to chase after him. Aizawa, you liar. Neon's mouth clamped shut just as Aizawa rounded the corner of the building and out of sight. She was several feet away, so any normal person would assume she was out of earshot, but the voice just then was not a normal person. She could recognize All Might's voice anywhere. Neon hurriedly ducked out of the way so as not to be seen if either of the two should look around the corner. You punished a whole class of last year's class with expulsion. You cut those you judged to be without potential without any hesitation, All Might continued. For a man like that to take back his words, that must be because you also felt the potential of that kid, right? Also? Aizawa shot back. You seem to be paying extra attention to that kid. Is that how a teacher should be acting? His potential was not zero. That's how all there is. I always cut those I find without potential. Nishiyama-chan. We're heading in now. Achiko shouted and Neon quickly shot up to her feet. Coming. Neon said as she ran to catch up with the girls and hoped the world's greatest hero did not discover her eavesdropping. All Might has his eye on Midoriya-sen. I wonder why? Neon thought to herself as she changed back into her school uniform. When she got back to the classroom to retrieve her stuff, Tenya was already at the front of the classroom handing out the printouts to his fellow classmate. Some had already taken off, but there were still a few that were taking their time in leaving. Here is the curriculum for this semester. Please take this and review it in full, Tenya instructed. Want to take the train home together? Neon asked as she took a sheet and folded it in half. What? No helicopter or fancy car to come pick you up? Denki teased as he packed up his things. Helicopters are only for family emergencies, Neon replied and went to her desk to retrieve her backpack. Seriously? Mina and Denki shouted, you actually have a helicopter? Neon shrugged. It comes in handy. Oh, yeah. 'Cause that's why we don't have a helicopter in our house, said a boy with red hair whose name Neon remembered was Kirishima Ijiro, because we like to drag things out. Neon's eyes crinkled up by a growing smile that then became a full laugh. Your sarcastic tone is noted, she said with the smile still spread on her face. Tenya's jaw dropped and he adjusted his glasses with both hands on the sides of his frames to get a better look at the girl who he had rarely seen laugh before. It had been a long time. When she saw his stance, Neon's expression went back to its usual blank state and she blinked. Is something wrong? And nothing, Nishiyama-san, Tenya said. I've just never seen you socialize with other classmates this well before. Neon frowned and contemplated his words. The opposite can be said too, Ida-kun. I don't think people dislike me as much here. Tenya put a hand to his chin. It took a moment for him to realize she was right. Normally, people would be put off by how freely Neon used her quirk and her disregard for rules and decorum. Himself being one of those people initially. However, since this was a specialized course where they were allowed, if not encouraged, to use their quirks as part of their education, it definitely helped ease the oddity of meeting Neon for the first time. I see your point, Nishiyama-san. Still, Neon's distance from people was partially voluntary as well and Tenya was well aware of it. Too well aware as. Flashback, Tenya and Neon, age 7. This is bad, isn't it? Neon said as she stared helplessly in her soft little hands where two small bubbles rested gently on her palms. They were sitting in the park with two black-suited bodyguards flanking them on either side of the swing set. Despite Neon's request for them to help push, they stood there like statues with their eyes forward and their hands clasped in front of them. Both of their families were late in picking them up from school, so Neon had made the decision to wait for them in the park. The teachers were hesitant at first but then gave in when Neon pointed out that she had two fully trained protectors at her side, which was safer than anything the teachers could provide. I do not get it, Tenya said as he popped one of them with his own finger and listened to the faint sounds of birds chirping. Why is it bad? It doesn't hurt anyone. But, it doesn't help either, Neon whispered and her head hung lower. It's not a useful quirk. Mother and father will be disappointed. You're lucky, Tenya-kun. You have the same quirk as your brother. I wish I did too. The little boy couldn't help but puff out his chest. He powered up his legs and used the trajectory to push his swing forward. I'm not as fast as Ne-san yet, but just you wait. Someday I'll be just like him. Lucky, Neon whispered. Tears started to fall down her cheek. Her quirk was late in developing but she had held on hope. Her brother had inherited his father's ability to crystallize things and Neon knew how much that pleased her father. Not a lot made him happy these days, at least around her. But to think that this was the quirk she had gotten. She knew of all the quirks she could have inherited, her late mother's was the one that would displease father the most. Necken. Tenya jumped off his swings and he ran over to her when he saw her crying. Why are you sad? I want to be useful, she whimpered as she covered her face with her hands, letting the last bubble fly up into the sky. I want to make mother and father happy. Slam. Yeah. Tenya gasped as two large men came charging out from the bushes. One bodyguard fell face first to the ground with two darts in his neck while the other was flattened and pinned to the ground by an unseen weight. Tenya-kun. Run. Neon gasped as she jumped off the swings and grabbed Tenya's hand, sprinting away, but she barely made it 2 steps before being lifted up into the air. Necken? Little Tenya shouted, losing his grip on her. What's going on? Tenya-kun. They're kidnappers. Run. Neon screamed. They? Tenya gasped, too frozen in shock and fear to move. A shadow loomed over him and he looked over to see a thin man with elongated pursed lips like a seahorse. Smart kid. The seahorse man said. She knew it wasn't just you. Someone above Neon's head clucked his tongue. Is it? Just shut up and get rid of the boy. We only need Dash. What? With his attention on his partner, he did not expect the little girl to fling her head backwards, head-butting him squarely in the nose. Mother Dash. The man holding Neon materialized, his mirror-like skin flipping into normal flesh as he grabbed his nose, that was spilling out with blood instinctively, thus dropping the girl who wasted no time. As soon as her feet hit the ground, she kicked hard off the ground and launched her head right into the pucker-mouthed stomach. Oof! The man grunted, but the child's force was not strong enough. He grabbed her by the shoulders and then held her with just one arm, pinning her to his side. Stop fighting, you little brat. Run. Tenya-kun. Get help. Neon screamed as her legs flailed out behind her, trying with all her strength to get away. Nekin. Tenya whispered. Use your quirk. Just like your brother. Neon yelled and something clicked inside the boy's head. To be like his brother, he needed to do all that he could help. Tenya charged up his legs, but instead of running away, he mimicked what the little girl had done but with 100 times more force. Not so fast, the bloody-nosed man growled as he reached over to grab Tenya, but the boy was too fast. Gah! The pucker mouth gasped as Tenya's head struck hard, cracking ribs and knocking the air out of his lungs. Neon rolled to the floor, and this time it was the boy who took her hand. He pulled her up, put her on his back, and then ran towards the exit. Hang on, Nekin. Hang. Something sharp hit Tenya right in the back of his upper thigh, and suddenly, his whole body went numb. His engine slowed and he fell on his knees. Yeah. Neon gasped, and she turned to see the pucker mouth with his fingers pinching his lips tightly. My darts can put even a charging rhino to sleep. The man coughed as he got to his feet. You're fast, kid. I'll give you that, but not fast enough. Tenya-kun. Wake up. Wake up. Neon cried frantically as she tried to shake him awake. Waekiyuk pp. The kidnappers closed in on the kids, but the girl would not leave the boy's side. She stuck her arms out and lifted her chin defiantly at the kidnappers. Her lips quivered with fear, which reflected in her eyes, but she did not budge. If they were going to dispose of Tenya, they would have to get through her. Silly kid. The bloody-nosed man grunted as he held back an arm in preparation to backhand the girl. Whack. Bow. Suddenly, the kidnappers were shooting backwards and away from each other with their faces dented in from opposite sides of their cheeks. Sorry I'm late, I got held up at work. Neon cried with relief before she even looked up at the hero. The voice was enough for her to recognize Tenya's brother. She watched as Ingenium went over to the kidnappers and tied them up with rope. He then took out his phone. Hello. This is the pro-hero Ingenium. I'd like to report a crime at the Nishiyama park, he said. 2 attempted kidnappers. The children are safe. I will stay here and help facilitate. Yes. Thank you. He hung up and then walked over to her. He crouched over his little brother and pulled the dart out of his leg. He then turned to Neon. Are you hurt anywhere? Did they hit you guys? I'm sorry. I put Tenya-kun in danger, Neon whispered. I shouldn't have dash. A warm hand was placed on her head and she looked up at Tensei, who smiled gently at her. This is not your fault, Neon-chan. You did everything you could, right? Neon nodded. But it wasn't enough. We couldn't even get out of the park. You delayed them long enough for me to arrive, Tensei said, and that's pretty amazing. Neon gulped. Was I useful? Tensei nodded. Ah, you were definitely useful. Present day. Ever since that day, Neon requested that he never call her Nekin again. In turn, she referred to him as just his last name. They also stopped hanging out and she was more hesitant to engage with anyone. Even so, even with the decision to hide any sort of familiarity between the two, she still referred to him as Kun. Maybe it was her way of subtly hanging on to that brief moment of friendship they had. Maybe it was a way of a small token of her apology for putting him in danger in the first place. Whatever the case, their relationship had changed since that day and was never the same. At least, until now. Have you finished handing out the paper? Neon asked as she slung her backpack over her shoulder and placed her headphones around her neck. Can we leave now? Tenya looked down at his hands and his eyes widened. There is still one copy that I have not yet handed out yet. Is there anyone who didn't come to the classroom yet? Or did Aizawa-sensei make extra copies? It's that Midoriya guy, the boy with the red hair said. He was sent to see Recovery Girl. Oh, yes. Tenya said, I will wait for him here then when he is done and make sure he gets this. I did an initial reading of our curriculum and we have a lot of difficult subjects we will be covering. As expected of such an elite school. Neon stretched her arms over her head and slipped her headphones over her ears. Okay, she yawned, I'll just wait for you out front then. Bye, Mina. Bye, Denki. Bye, cool hair. Bye, funny guy. See you guys tomorrow. Wait. Am I funny guy or cool hair? The boy in red hair shouted to Neon, but her music was already playing and she had one foot out the door. Mina giggled and pointed to Shoto, who had been neatly folding his tracksuit before putting it in his bag. I think cool hair guy is Todoroki-kun. Soru, Kirishima-kun. What? I have cool hair too, the boy in red hair yelled. Needless to say, I keep her in check / she was all bad nevertheless, yeah. / Callan it quits now baby I'm a wreck, / crash at my place baby you're a wreck. Outside the front steps of the school, Neon sat on the edge of the top step while humming along to her music. Her feet tapped to the rhythm while her head bounced steadily along too. Her eyes were closed and she was firmly immersed in the song until she heard the reverberations of someone tapping on the sound bubble she had encased herself in. Doc. Doc. She opened her eyes and then made her bubble disappear when she saw it was Tenya and Midoriya. All done? She asked. Thank you for waiting, Tenya said. Neon got to her feet, pulled her headphones down, and she nodded over at the wrapped-up finger on Midoriya's right hand. All healed. Ah. Midoriya took several steps back and his face started to redden. Igriagalles. Neon tilted her head to the side. Do I make you uncomfortable? Midoriya's head shook furiously. No. Not at all. Your voice says otherwise, Neon said with a raised eyebrow as she walked past the guys and headed for the gate. But that's okay. I'm going to guess this is more due to my gender than my personality. Indeed, Tenya said, or it could be that you scolded Midoriya-kun during the entrance exam presentation. Neon stopped in her tracks. Oh yeah, she said and then looked over her shoulder at Midoriya. You were being loud. Midoriya's head hung in shame. Yes, I apologize. Forgiven, Neon said. As the three walked towards the school gates, Neon was just about to start up her music again when Tenya broke the silence. I was really taken in by Aizawa-sensei, Tenya said. I even thought, this is the best of the best and such. I didn't think a teacher would encourage us with a lie. Neon debated telling him what she had overheard but then held her tongue. Telling him would mean revealing who she heard it from and she would rather keep that part to herself until had more information. Of all the noises and sounds Neon disliked, it was baseless rumors and hearsay that topped the list. Hey, you guys, wait for me. Neon stopped and turned, recognizing Achiko's voice, and so did the boys. They waited for her to catch up to them. When she did, Neon tilted her head. Are you heading to the station too? Yeah. Can I tag along with you guys, Neon? Of course, Neon replied. You are Yurarako Achiko-chan, yes? You and Nishiyama-san are already on a first-name type of relationship. Tenya gasped as his hands thrusted every which way. How is that possible? Achiko giggled. Yes. I'm Uraraka Achiko, she said. Ida Tenya-kun and you are Midoriya Deku-kun. Yes. Midoriya's whole body stiffened. Deku? Huh. But during the fitness test, the boy named Bakugo said, Deku, you bastard. Isn't that your name? Achiko asked. My real name is Izuku, but Deku is what Kaken calls me to make fun of me? Midoriya said with a blush to his cheeks. It's an insult? Tenya asked. Neon snorted. Sounds like something Noisy Boy would do, but Deku doesn't sound like an insult to me. What convoluted logic did Noisy Boy spew for that name? Deku, he said. Deku was short for the kanji way of saying, the one who can't do anything, Midoriya confessed with his head hung low. That is a real stretch, Neon said. He's really bad at insults. Is that right? Achiko said as she scratched the back of her head. I'm sorry. My mistake. But to me, Deku sounds like the kanji way of saying you can do it. So, I kinda like it. Please call me Deku. Midoriya yelled out, his whole face completely red again. Midoriya-kun. Tenya shouted in surprise. You're accepting it way too easily. Wasn't that an insult? Midoriya covered his hands with his face. It's like a Copernican revolution. Cope. Achiko asked as Neon snorted. She put on her headphones and played a new song on her phone. And they called it Puppy Luvu/Oh I guess they'll never know. Suddenly, a black car skidded to a halt in front of the gate and the driver ran out of it to open the passenger door and bowed to them. Oju-sen, please get in the car. Oh, sir. Midoriya asked and then he gaped at Neon. Are you some type of heiress? Neon threw her head back and groaned at the sky. This had kosher written all over it. It was their family driver so she knew it was safe but still they had protocols in place and she had to follow it. One can never be too careful, especially when it came to the safety of her sister. She fished out her phone and dialed her brother's number. You sent the car? She asked as soon as he picked up. Hello to you too. How was school? He asked back. Why'd you send the car? It is vital for you to return home as soon as possible. I allowed you to take public transportation this morning as you would be escorted by young Ida but dash. How's Akia? She's fine. She's just been asking for you, he said. Fine. I'll take the car but first, code word? Code word. Midoriya and Achiko repeated. I do not wish to speak it, Kosher said stiffly. Neon smirked. That was exactly why she picked it. How else was she to know if the other person was okay or if they'd been compromised if they didn't choose something that either of them would never say otherwise? They agreed to it and Kosher knew what he had to do. Fine. Kosher sighed and then he mumbled under his breath in one swoop, Filthy bitan let's gethype. Okay. I'll get in the car. She hung up the phone and she shrugged at her confused classmates. Looks like I have to go. Need a lift to the station? It's okay, Tenya said. I don't want to delay your return home. Okay, Neon said as she climbed into the car. If you're sure. Go ahead. We'll see you tomorrow, Tenya said. As the car sped off, Tenya saw that Midoriya and Achiko were still in the dark of what happened. The children of the Nishiyama family has a history of being kidnapped, Tenya explained. That's why there are specific precautions that Nishiyama-san takes at all times. Seriously? That's so scary. Achiko exclaimed. To have to experience that multiple times must be very traumatizing, especially if it happens at a very early age, Midoriya mumbled to himself. It will explain why she feels the need to have those sound bubbles near her at all times and why her reflexes are pretty fast. Oh, I never thought of it that way. I just thought those bubbles were cute, Achiko said while Midoriya jumped up in surprise, not knowing he had spoken those thoughts out loud. Then Achiko gasped. Ah, that must also be why she constantly sends texts to her little sister, to check if she is okay. Ah, yes, that's one reason, Tenya said. One reason? Midoriya asked. I'm sorry. I've already divulged too much on Nishiyama-san's private matters. Tenya shouted and then he bowed. Please keep what I told you to yourselves. Midoriya and Achiko shared a look and then they smiled at Tenya. Of course Ida-kun, Achiko said. Whyyyyyy. Ida-kun. Tell me why. Neon moaned with her head down on the cafeteria table with her plate of tempura resting next to her head untouched. Why did I have to sit through a morning of boring classes while I listen to things I already know? Both Achiko and Midoriya looked past their food at Tenya, who was halfway through his plate of beef stew. He lowered his spoon and sighed. I'm sorry, Nishiyama-san, but you have to or else they will not allow you to take the hero basic training in the afternoon. Why won't the teachers listen to reason? Neon groaned as she covered her ears with her hands. She had to make do with this sensation for now because President Mike confiscated them after she tried to listen to music during English class. I can't listen to this boring drivel. Will drive me crazy. Crazy? Do you really know all the material already? Achiko asked. Yeah, Neon sighed and then she glared at the boy in glasses. This is all your fault, Ida-kun? Yes, I apologize, Tenya said as he bowed his head. How is it Ida-kun's fault? Midoriya asked. Because he told me to read as many books as I can in his family's library to prepare for the entrance exams. Neon yelled. So? Achiko asked. Tenya lowered his head even more. I sincerely apologize. I thought it would be better to over-prepare for an entrance exam of this school's caliber. I'm still confused, Achiko said. Neon pointed at her ears. I remember everything I hear. I think it's part of my quirk but I never really looked into it. I see, Midoriya said, so if you just read out loud a book dash. I remember everything in it, she finished, slightly taken aback by how quickly Midoriya caught on to that. So when I study I just have to read out loud what is in front of me and I'll remember it? And Ida-kun's family library has a lot of books. A lot. Including past textbooks from his brother's time at UA. For all 3 years. How far did you get into? Midoriya asked. Neon glared at Tenya. You tell them. Tenya gulped. By the time I realized to stop Nishiyama-san, she was already halfway through the English material we'd be learning in our 3rd year. 3rd year? Achiko and Midoriya exclaimed. Too loud. Neon moaned. But yes. Which means I'm going to have to sit through at least 4 hours of mind-numbing lectures for the next 2 years minimum. 2 years. That's a death sentence. But at least that means you don't have to worry about written exams for the next 2 years, right? Achiko said with as much positivity as she could muster. Yeah, that's true, Neon said. Maybe after class you can try talking to the principal, Midoriya suggested. Maybe he and the teachers can figure out an alternate curriculum for you? It might be the only thing that's keeping you in this year is your hero experience. Otherwise, any normal school would have you skip a year or 2. Neon sat up and she blinked. You think that'll work? You have a strong case. You are the first student in 10 years to get a perfect score on the written entrance exam after all, Tenya said. You got what? Achiko and Midoriya shouted in unison. Keep your voices down, but yes. I got a perfect score. Don't make a big deal out of it. If you were a human tape recorder you could do it too, Neon said as she wrinkled her nose but then she lowered her hands from her ears. She grabbed her chopsticks and began to eat her food with zeal. Alright, I'll talk to the principal after class. Although, I kind of wish he doesn't put me into another class. I just learned everyone's names. So you want to stay in the class but you don't want to be in the class either? Achiko asked, getting more confused by the second. Nishiyama-san, Tenya said, you can't have it both ways. I know, Neon grumbled. After lunch, the group returned to their class and they all waited with bated breath for their first hero basic training lesson. No one made a noise. There was too much anticipation and excitement not just over what they were about to learn but which pro-hero was selected to teach them. I am. A familiar roar boomed through the hallway and Neon's eyes widened. Slam. Coming through the door like a normal person, screamed the world's greatest hero as he leaned in the open door frame with his blue cape billowing majestically behind him. It's All Might. Denki gasped. Wow, he really is a teacher. The boy in the red hair who Neon learned during math class was named Kirishima Ijiro. Yes. All Might said as he marched to the front of the room and put his hands on his hips. I teach hero basic training. It is a subject where you train in different ways to learn the basic of being a hero. You'll take the most units of this subject. Let's get right into it. This is what we'll do today. He reached behind his cape and then pulled out a white card with the word battle printed on it in bold red letters. Yes, combat training. Neon inhaled slowly. Yes, this is what she needed to learn. And with that, comes this. All Might roared and pointed to the wall next to him. The sounds of gears clicking into place followed by the whirring of engines came through the wall and then metal shelves began to pull out from the wall revealing suitcases numbered from 1 to 21 on them. Costumes made based on your Quirk registrations and requests you sent before school started, All Might announced. Woo-woo, the class cheered. Yes, they costumes are assigned by your seat number. After you have changed, gather in ground beta. All Might said, young men you can change in the classroom next door. It is empty today. Young ladies you can change here. Ready? Go. Desks were practically flung across the room as the most eager and energetic students clamored over each other to get to their suitcases. Neon took her time and waited for everyone to grab theirs. She sat at her desk and she noticed that the boy in front of her did the same. She poked his sides with a pencil to get his attention but she didn't wait for him to turn around to look at her. You're not eager to see your costume? She asked. It's not going anywhere, he replied. There's no need to rush, and don't poke me. Then how am I supposed to get your attention? Neon asked. Just call me by my name, Todoroki Shoto, and my hair's not cool. It's up for interpretation, Neon said. She saw that the crowd had spread out. She got up from her seat and she headed towards the suitcase marked 16. When she got there she grabbed it as well as the one with 15 on the front. She went over and handed it to Todoroki. Here you go. Thanks, he said. He got up from his desk but just as he was about to leave he stopped and turned to her. Did you really get full marks on the written exam? Neon nodded. Yeah. Why? Impressive, was all he said and then he left the room. Hurry up and change. Achiko said as she ran to Neon with her suit in hand. Oh, I can't wait to see what everyone wears. Is that your suit? Mina exclaimed, eyeing the pale pink color. That's so cute, Uraraka-chan. Click. Neon opened her suitcase and her heart pounded in her chest when she saw her suit. The first thing she took out of it was a sleek and shiny black helmet with white circles around the ears, mimicking headphones. Neon stared at her reflection against the black visor. This is me. Whoa. So cool. The girl with the long ears named Kyokujiro shouted as she ran over to Neon. She was already in her costume, which was a leather jacket over a salmon pink shirt, black pants and combat boots. Thanks, Neon said as she set her helmet down and took off her blazer. My sister designed the look for me, she likes to draw. You look pretty cool too. Like you're ready to rock the stage. Jiro's face turned pink. Really? That's exactly the look I was going for. Look. She slammed her foot up on the desk for Neon to see the speakers embedded into the heels. I even had them install this to help boost my sound. Oh yeah. Neon said, your quirk is also sound-based. We can work pretty well together. Jiro smirked, showing a trace of sharp teeth that made her look viciously fierce. Yeah, I think so too. Neon shed off the rest of clothes and put on her suit. It was a black bodysuit with bright pink, green and yellow stripes running up the side of her arms and legs. On her shoulders were small metallic speakers that faced forward and on her stomach were square buttons. There were 4 buttons on each side of her stomach and if the costume makers made it according to Akia's direction, it would light up in different neon colors when pressed as well but those buttons weren't there for decoration. Neon fished inside her pocket to find the audio jack and she plugged it into her phone that could connect her suit to it. She stepped into her black sneakers and put her phone in her pocket. Alright, let's test this out, she said as she put her helmet over her head and touched the circular buttons on the side. If I sound lazy, just ignore my tone / cause I'm always gonna answer when you call my phone / like what's up, danger? Danger. Neon smiled behind her helmet as she saw the stripes on her bodysuit light up with the beat of the music. Her fellow classmates turned to her in surprise, but as the music played on in the classroom, the atmosphere changed from excitement to that of confidence. Perfect. They say the clothes make the man, young men and ladies. All Might shouted with his ever-gleaming smile as the students gathered at the designated spot and stepped forth into the sun in their new attire. Be fully aware, from now on, you are heroes. Now, shall we begin, you zygotes? Neon looked around and saw that they were in a mock city similar to where she had her practical exam. She walked a couple of steps back to get a wider view, but then something else caught her eye. Midoriya's costume also had a helmet component, but his helmet had two spike-like things poking out of its head and a metal teeth-like grill that lined the bottom. She blinked and then looked over at All Might, whose hair and smile held a similar shape. Midoriya really is a fanboy. Now it's time for combat training, All Might said. A black-gloved hand shot up into the air. Sensei. Tenya called out from under his white costume that heavily resembled his own brother's. This is a battle center from the entrance exam. So will we be conducting urban battles again? No, we're going to move ahead 2 steps, All Might said. Most of the time fighting villains takes place outside, but if you look at the total numbers, atrocious villains appear indoors at a higher rate. Imprisonment, house arrest, backroom deals. In this society filled with heroes, truly intelligent villains hide in the shadows. He went on to explain the rules. They were to split into 2 groups, villains and heroes. The villains and heroes were to fight 2-on-2 in an indoor battle. The mock scenario was that the villains have a nuclear weapon somewhere in the hideout. The hero's mission is to try to dispose of the weapon. The heroes need to either catch the villains or get the nuclear weapon back in the allotted time to win. Meanwhile, the villains would need to protect the nuclear weapon for the whole time or catch the heroes. Teams and opponents will be determined by drawing lots. All Might said, and since your class has 21 people, one of you will be unpaired, but we will get to that part once everyone else is assigned. Neon reached into the box and took out the letter K. She held it up and waited for her partner to arrive. One by one, everyone paired up except for her. Neon looked down at the ball and then at their teacher. All Might Sensei, she said as she held up the ball even higher, I'm the odd one out. Indeed you are, young Nishiyama. So for you, you can decide, either pick you let me draw a team randomly for you to become a 3-person team with, not knowing who you will be up against or who you will be paired up with, or you can wait until the end, watch how each of the teams did, and go up against the winning team that claimed victory the fastest. All Might said, but you must make your decision now. Why not just stick her into a random team of 2? Denki asked, isn't that way easier? Much like heroes often get paired up with each other on the fly, more often than not, a hero must decide whether to wait for reinforcements or to go in on their own. That is also a type of combat training, All Might said. So young Nishiyama, what will your decision be? Neon stuffed her hands in her pocket and thought it over. If she became part of a team now, she would have the advantage of having 2 other people to work with. However, if she waited until the end, she would be able to have seen everyone's quirks and battle tactics. The answer was clear. I'll wait and fight on my own, Neon said. What? Why would you choose that? Denki shouted. Having more people means you have more power. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles, Neon recited. Denki asked. Knowledge is power if used correctly, Neon said. Well said, young Nishiyama, All Might said. Okay everybody. I drew up the matchups randomly and the first ones up are Team A versus Team D. Team A will be the heroes and Team D will be the villains. Both teams get ready while the rest of you head to the monitor room. Yes, Sensei. Neon approached Tenya while everyone else walked towards the building at the center of the city that housed the surveillance room. He was on Team D as villains with Katsuki and they were to go against Midoriya and Achiko, posing as heroes. You going to be okay? Oh, Nishiyama-san. That's your costume. It's cool, Midoriya exclaimed. Neon gave a nod of thanks but directed her attention back to Tenya, who jutted out his hands. Yes. It will be difficult to think of myself as a villain, but I will persevere for this training exercise. I don't mean that, Neon said, and she turned to Katsuki. I mean, being teamed up with him. Huh? What's that supposed to mean? Katsuki yelled. Just because you have a helmet on doesn't mean you're still now a stupid dye job. Neon shuddered. Itakuin, if it helps with getting into character, I would want to end the world too if I had to work alongside Noisy Boy. What did you say? Amazing, Nishiyama-san has no qualms about teasing Kaken. That's UA for you. Amazing people. Midoriya mumbled and Neon clapped a hand on his shoulder. I'll be cheering for your team, Midoriya, she said solemnly. Do your best. But aren't you good friends with Ida-kun? Achiko said while Tenya adjusted his glasses. No. I understand. I'm a villain now. I should not have any public support for this type of behavior, Tenya said. Achiko snorted. You're taking this too seriously. Sorry, Ida-kun. Neon thought as she headed towards the monitor room. I just really want to see them shut Noisy Boy up. Neon leaned against the wall in furthest corner of the room while she watched along with the rest of the class in tense silence. Her helmet was off and she was holding it against her hip. She wanted to make sure she was watching everything clearly. This might have been a mock scenario, but the battle between Midoriya and Katsuki was real. Too real. They could only watch in silence since the cameras had no mics attached to them. The only person who could hear was the teacher, who had a feed for him to speak with his students and stop them should the fight get out of hand. Although there were several times Neon thought that line was crossed, the teacher still remained silent. Katsuki's face on the monitors was already bordering maniacal and he had managed to blast away multiple walls of an entire floor, including an entire corner of the floor. His suit was definitely made to enhance not just the strength of his quirk but also the distance as well. Neon watched as Midoriya and Katsuki ran up to one another, but just as Midoriya was about to block a punch from Katsuki straight on, Katsuki launched himself up and over Midoriya's head, using his blast to change his trajectory in midair. He fired a blast to Midoriya's back and sent the boy flying forward. He doesn't look like the type to think, but he's more subtle than I expected. Neon heard Todoroki murmur and she couldn't but agree. Getting in a clean hit requires fine lateral adjustments to the power of the explosions, Momo added. He's talented, too talented, Denki sighed. Noisy Boy is not just a one-trick pony, Neon said as she stood up and took a step closer to the monitor. I need to watch my classmates a little more closely and assume nothing. Katsuki was still on the offense and it was clear he was not only hitting hard but hitting fast. He's not giving Midoriya time to think, Neon murmured, too invested in what she was seeing to keep her thoughts to herself. Clearly, he realizes that Midoriya's biggest strength is his analytical mind. Midoriya has a good brain? Mina asked. Neon nodded. If you hear all his mutterings this morning when a new sensei came into the room, you can tell that he knows a lot of information about them. Most of the information isn't widely made available, so he had to have gotten it through his own deductions. It's true. He did mutter a lot about our teachers when they came in for our morning classes, admitted a boy with purple balls for hair named Mineta. He happened to be seated behind Midoriya during class, which was not good for him because he was very short for his age. You can hear that all the way from the back of the room, an invisible girl named Hagakure gasped. Neon nodded. No wonder you complain we're noisy all the time, Mina laughed. You are. Neon said, now quiet, I'm trying to watch. Hero team wins. What the heck? The losers have barely a scratch on them and both winners are on the ground. They lost the battle but won the war, huh? Even though this is a training exercise, they held nothing back. The room was abuzz with Team A's shocking win. This whole time they had been watching the battle between Midoriya and Katsuki as if it was a one-on-one fight, but instead of attacking Katsuki, Midoriya chose to use his quirk to punch through 3 floors of the building. It created an opening for Achiko to use her zero-gravity quirk and retrieve the weapon, claiming the victory. While All Might went down to the battleground and sent Midoriya to get more medical attention from Recovery Girl, the rest of Class 1A were locked in heavy discussion about what had transpired. He had to go all out if he was up against someone like Bakugo, Denki said. But All Might Sensei should have stopped them before it got to this point, Momo said. Midoriya-san looks seriously injured. Nah, that was a manly fight. Ijiro Kirishima said as he pumped his fist up in the air. Sensei made the right call. Jeru. Weren't you the one who kept asking if he should stop them? Said the frog girl, who mentioned to the class that morning that she liked to be called Tsu. Throughout everything, Neon kept quiet as she dissected everything internally. So many questions went through her head. This battle was clearly personal for Midoriya and Katsuki. Given what Midoriya had said about Katsuki giving him the name Deku, she knew the relationship between him and Katsuki was tense, but she didn't realize it was to that degree. What was it about Midoriya that triggered Katsuki so much? The anger was definitely one-sided and Midoriya wasn't the type to keep aggravating someone intentionally. Also, given that they knew each other before high school, how did Katsuki not know Midoriya had a quirk? Were they not close? But they were close enough for Midoriya to call Katsuki Kaken. Neon pushed these little curiosities out of her mind. She knew she had to focus on the training exercise as she had to learn all of her classmates' failures and successes. Their decisions and actions are the deciding factor on who she would be going up against, but for some reason, her brain just kept going to Midoriya. There was something puzzling about him which was totally opposite of his character. From what Neon could tell, Midoriya was a good-natured person, who was passionate and sincere about being a hero. He wasn't the type to have secrets. Clack. The sound of the automatic door sliding open behind her surprised her from her thoughts. She let out a little gasp and on instinct, a sound bubble emerged from her and she held up her fists in front of her face in a defensive stance and her helmet fell to the ground. It took her a second to realize it was Tenya, Ochiko and Katsuki with All Might. They had returned to review their battle and for All Might to announce the next teams to go. All Might's smile shined at her for a beat and then the hero let out a full laugh. Sorry to startle you, young Nishiyama. We have returned to review the battle and to announce the teams. Could you please release your bubble so that we may enter the room? Sorry. Old habit, Neon mumbled as her hands fell to her side and the bubble vanished with a pop. She bent low to pick up her helmet and as she stood up, she intentionally directed her gaze at All Might, as not to make any eye contact with her fellow classmates. She hadn't done that in a long time. It had been a while since she had let her guard down that much. She was thankful none of her classmates were voicing their thoughts out loud, but she was sure she startled many of them. Well, let's begin our review of the first battle. All Might shouted as he marched to the front of the room. The heroes have won the battle, but with that said, the MVP for this round is young Ida. The class murmured while Tenya's jaw dropped. It's not either Ochiko-chan or Midoriya-chan? Su asked. Well, why is that? Does anyone know? All Might demanded. Immediately Momo's hand went right up. Yes, All Might sensei. That is because Ida-san adapted the most to the context of the training. From watching the match, it appears Bakugo-san acted on his own because of an obviously personal grudge. And as All Might sensei said earlier, it is foolish to launch a large-scale attack indoors. In the same way, taking into consideration the damage he received, Midoriya's plan was also rash. As for Uraraka-san, she let her guard down mid-battle and her final attack was too reckless. If she treated the weapon as a real nuclear weapon, she would not have been able to do something so dangerous. Ida-san had prepared for his opponent's arrival and assumed it would be a fight over the weapon, which made him late in responding to the final attack. The hero team only won because they took advantage of the fact that this was training. They were practically breaking the rules. Young Ida also has parts of him that could be more relaxed, All Might said with a waver to his voice, indicating to Neon that he had not expected any of the students to hit the nail right on the head. But, well, that was correct. Great work, young Yaoyorozu. The rest of the class gaped at Momo while Neon's lips twisted into a thoughtful frown. If I go against her, it would be a battle of intellect as well as strength. I'll need to be careful. One must start with the basics to develop depth of learning. We must strive to devote ourselves wholeheartedly, Momo said with her hand on her hips. Otherwise, we cannot become top heroes. Alright. Let's move on to the next group in a new location. Tackle this training after thinking about what we just talked about. All Might said. Yes, sensei, the class exclaimed. The next teams to go turned out to be Todoroki and Shoji versus Ojiro and Hagakure, with the latter team being the villains. After what happened in the first battle, Neon knew this one would not be as intense, but she still kept her eyes peeled. She could not afford to miss a single detail. Hagakure is taking off her gloves and boots, Denki shouted as he pointed at the monitor. She's going to be completely invisible. What a waste, Mineta said with a defeated sigh. If only the girls we can actually see had to do that too. What the hell are you saying? Jiro shouted and gave Mineta a hard punch across the face. Neon's eyebrows raised as she stared at the small boy in a new light. Must be careful of that one too, for an entirely different reason. Now, let's start the second indoor person-to-person combat training match. All Might announced as he sprinted back into the room. The timer starts now. Shoji opened up his many tentacle-like arms with ears sprouting out at the tips. Then, a mouth appeared on one of them as Todoroki approached his partner. They could see that Shoji was saying something to Todoroki, who then walked deeper into the building. Then, to everyone's confusion, Shoji exited the building and Todoroki raised up his right hand. Frosty air emerged from his palm and then he flattened it up against the wall. Itch! The class gasped as the entire building was encased in thick ice. The opponent's feet were stuck in place by it too, so Todoroki easily walked past them to get to the weapon. It was a quick and overwhelming victory. His opponents never stood a chance. H-Hero TT Team wins. All Might announced through chattering teeth as everyone started to huddle together to keep warm. The chill from the ice had reached the monitor room. Hearing that, Todoroki placed his left palm on the frozen weapon and the ice began to melt and slowly formed steam. Wow! Sato shouted. What's up with that, Quirk? Denki asked. As expected of someone who got in through recommendations, Sue said. Alright. Everyone return and let's review. All Might shouted into the mic. What's to review? Todoroki won that single-handedly. Shiro gasped. There was nothing anyone can do against it. Neon sucked in a breath. There was no doubt in her mind with such a sudden victory that she would be up against this team. What could I have done? Neon thought to herself. The rest of the training went by without as much shock as the first two battles, but still, Neon took everything in quietly but with intense concentration. Each move and decision by her classmates were processed through her head and spat out with an idea of how to counter or an alternative option. It was like gathering multiple instruments and creating a symphony. Neon knew she might not be the top of the class when it came to physicality, but when it comes to improvising, she was confident she had them beat. Still, she was not here to flaunt her skills. She was here to improve and get stronger. Alright, young Nishiyama. It is your turn now and you will be going up against Team B. All Might declared, and then he stuck his hands in the boxes to determine what roles they would play. It seems luck is on your side, young Nishiyama. Team B will resume as heroes again. Neon shrugged. Villain. Hero, doesn't matter. I aim to win. I know you're a girl, Nishiyama-san, Kirishima said with a grin, but that's pretty manly. Neon turned to Shoji and Todoroki and she bowed slightly. I know you have already done this, but please take this seriously. I will be doing my best and I hope you will be too. Shoji said while Todoroki continued to stare with a poker face. Very well. Please proceed to Building F. Team B, you will be heroes again, and Nishiyama-san, you will be the villain. All Might shouted. Neon nodded and then proceeded to the designated area. She was on the 6th floor of an empty building. It was much like the previous battle. She too had a papier-mâché replica of a nuclear warhead behind her. She closed her eyes waiting for the timer to start. Ready? The battle begins, now. All Might said. Brang. Bonk. Wub 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 wub. Neon's fingers danced around the buttons, playing beats like a DJ, and with each sound she snapped her fingers and bubbles appeared out of the speakers on her shoulders. She moved both of her hands outwards and the bubbles spread to different corners of the building. Snap. Various sounds erupted through different parts of the building. If they were trying to gauge her position, they would definitely not get to it with sound. However, she knew she was doing this purely out of precaution, as Todoroki didn't need to know the previous location to immobilize the villains. On the flip side, Neon counted on the fact that the other team would not act so quickly as they did before. Only an idiot would try the same move twice, and Todoroki was no idiot. Neon could tell. That's why it was time to put her actual villainous plan in motion. She let out a long exhale and then moved the weapon to the corner of the room furthest from the windows but close to the door. She let out another long exhale and pressed one of the buttons on her suit. A high-frequency sound in low volume came out of her speaker and it formed into a bubble about the size of an apple. Neon let out another breath and then it stopped short when she saw that she could see the actual warm air fogging out of her lips. Todoroki's on the move. She snapped her fingers while touching the bubble with her right index finger. Suddenly, the bubble grew so large it almost took up almost the entire room, leaving just enough room for Neon to stand in the corner with the weapon. Crash. As soon as the bubble was fixed into place, the windows glazed over with ice and then Todoroki came crashing through the middle window with his left hand covered in icy mist, while Shoji came rushing in through the door but skidded to a halt immediately when he saw Neon's sound bubble. Todoroki, wait. Be careful of the bubble. Shoji shouted just as Todoroki was about to land into the room. Hurriedly, Todoroki grabbed the window frame with his right hand and balanced himself on it. He was a breath away from the bubble. A small piece of glass that did not break off from the window pane cut into his hand and a thin trickle of blood started to trickle down his arm. Neon drew in a sharp breath and for a second her sound barrier wavered, but she quickly collected herself. That is a high-frequency sound wave that will blow up this entire floor should you burst it, she warned. It is not as sturdy as my sound barrier. Even a temperature drop from your ice attack can cause it to burst. It would damage not just me but the weapon too. If this was a real nuclear weapon, you would risk blowing up the entire city. Millions of lives are hypothetically at stake. What? That's so extreme. Why would you go to this length? Shoji asked. All Might Sensei already said it would be foolish to launch a full-scale attack indoors. But I'm not launching an attack. This is defense. Whether or not the sound bomb goes off, well, that's in your hands. The heroes, Neon said, your move. You. Shoji shot a stunned look over to his teammate. What do we do? Todoroki's expression remained still, but a bead of sweat rolled down the side of his face. He wasn't even looking at his partner, just staring directly at the opponent as if trying to read her mind. Concede, Neon said, wrap yourself up with the capture tape or say you give up. Those are your only options. Minutes rolled by with the heroes and villain at a stalemate, with Neon shooting quick glances at Shoji every now and then but mostly keeping her focus on Todoroki, her biggest threat. This plan was a huge risk, but it was the only one she could think of. She couldn't win in a straightforward fight with Todoroki, so she had to resort to this. Mind games. Ridiculous, Todoroki said, finally breaking the silence, and suddenly, ice stretched out from under his grip and it immediately covered the room and freezing Neon's feet into place. The sudden force and drop of temperature destroyed her sound bubble almost instantly. Pop. Ee. Instinctively, Shoji covered his ears with his hands and dropped down to the ground, but Todoroki remained the same with just a thick layer of ice over his ears. The sound wave that burst through the room was the exact same level as when Neon first created it, and she felt her stomach drop right down to her frozen feet. That wasn't a loud sound at all, Shoji said as he slowly got to his feet while Todoroki calmly crossed over to Neon. For someone who reacted as you did to see someone getting hurt, even as small as a cut to the hand, Todoroki said, passing by Neon and putting his bleeding hand on the weapon, you couldn't possibly put something there that would actually cause harm. I call your bluff. Once again, Hero Team wins. All Might shouted into their earpieces. Damn it. Neon chuckled softly when Todoroki started to melt the ice with his left hand. I thought I had you there. I didn't fool you at all, did I? No. Todoroki said slowly, the reason why I acted was that I saw how often you looked at my hand. If my hand didn't get cut, I might have conceded. I definitely felt backed into a corner, Shoji admitted from the doorway, so you got me at least, Nishiyama. I think the MVP for this round will go to you. I did what I had to, Neon shrugged. From back in the monitor room, All Might's smile was fixed on his face. Behind him, the students were chatting amongst themselves about the events, but his eyes were fixed on the timer that had stopped as soon as Todoroki had put his hand on the weapon, securing the win. 11 minutes and 32 seconds. Young Nishiyama may have lost this round, but she pushed the fastest winning team to have one of the slower times without hardly lifting a finger. This one's strength isn't in her power. It's in her mind. She has unexpected methodologies. This is a hero people won't see coming. Hey you. Please tell us how our All Might's class is. What's it like to train under the greatest hero of all time? Are you a big fan of his? What has he taught you? Snap. Come on, Midoriya, Neon mumbled as a large bubble encased both of them. She hooked her arm under the green-haired boys and pulled him away from the media that was crowding the front gate of school. Just ignore them. Nothing good comes out of talking to the press. Nishiyama-san, Midoriya gasped, turning slightly red from the close proximity to her. Amazing, your bubble really does drown out all outside sounds. He looked over his shoulder at the muted crowd, who had cameras and microphones held out in every direction. Then Midoriya let out another gasp. Wait, Idakum. You left him back there. We need to dash. Leave him, Neon said. But you just said nothing good dash. Neon stopped and she raised an eyebrow. Itsuda-kun. You really think the stuff he says would be worthy enough to make the news? That's true, Midoriya said as Neon released her bubble and pulled her arm away from his. Wait, does that mean you think I'd say something they'd use? Neon nodded. You're not emotionally steady enough to handle the pressure of the media. You might divulge something you might not have intended to reveal, like how your quirk is like All Might's. Midoriya started to visibly sweat and Neon waved her hand in the air as she continued to walk into the school building. It's fine. All Might's quirk has always been shrouded in mystery. Even if it is related to your quirk, what does it matter to me? No skin off my back. Nishiyama-san. Midoriya whispered as Neon put her headphones back on her head. For the next couple of days, the media continued to swarm near the front gates of school, which Neon was secretly thankful for. With that kind of mob, there was no way her brother would send a family car to pick her up so she could use public transportation and take her time getting home. Her commute was the only time she could really use to explore and store new sounds since she couldn't skip school anymore. She and the principal, who was the most reasonable living being that she had ever talked to, albeit frightfully long-winded at times, had reached an agreement in regards to her normal classes. Midoriya was right. They could not move her up in terms of grade level because she would be behind on hero training. At the same time, the principal recognized the frustration of being taught something she already knew. However, he had pointed out to her knowing something and applying it were two different things. And that is how they reached the agreement that during the morning classes, Neon would be the teacher's assistant. She would help create and grade the tests of her classmates while also teaching a different class each day of the week. Monday was math. Tuesday was modern literature. Wednesday was history. Thursday was English and Friday was modern hero art history. None of the teachers had any objections to this arrangement, save one, but that was only because their homeroom teacher would have preferred it if someone else handled the school-centric business and so he could just focus on the hero stuff. All right, Aizawa said with a heaving sigh as he stood in front of the podium. Let's get down to homeroom business. Sorry about the late notice, but today I'll have you. The entire class tensed up, including Neon. Were they about to have another special training test? Decide on a class representative? He finished and everyone visibly relaxed. Neon slumped over her desk and cupped her chin with one hand. Boring. I want to be class rep. Pick me. Kirishima shouted. Me too. I want to do it too. Almost everybody's hands went up in the air except for Midoriya, Neon, and Todoroki. The experience of leading a group of heroes, even if they are just heroes in training, was an opportunity students should not pass up. Even so, Neon formed a sound bubble over her head to drown out the ruckus. Any type of group work was not her forte, nor was it something she liked to do, so why bother taking it away from someone who actually wanted to do it? Especially someone she knew very well, who had been class representative for as long as she could remember. She looked out the window and pondered where she should go after class when she heard the now familiar tapping against her bubble. Doc, doc. The bubble unpopped before she even fully turned to look at Todoroki. We're voting, he said as he handed her a square piece of paper. K. It didn't take long for everyone to cast their vote. Considering they didn't know each other well enough yet, it was safe to assume most people wrote down their own names. Tenya diligently counted the ballots, and when he finally finished tallying everything up on the board, he hung his head in despair. One vote. Tenya sighed with defeat and he looked over at Neon, who could only shrug, while Midoriya jumped up from his seat. Just 3 votes for me? He yelled. Why Deku? Who voted for him? Katsuki demanded. Well, it was better than voting for you, Zero admitted, which earned him a glare from the explosive boy. What did you say? Neon dangled her hand up in the air. Can we move this along, sensei? She asked. Yeah, Aizawa said as he got out of his yellow sleeping bag and took back his position at the podium. All right. Looks like Midoriya is your class rep and Yaoyorozu is your deputy class rep. Seriously? Midoriya said through nervously chattering teeth. Okay. Now that business is done, everybody go to lunch, their teacher instructed. It was a very silent walk from the classroom to the cafeteria. Midoriya was mumbling the whole time about the duties of a leader and the qualifications they must have to be won, while Tenya's mouth was shut the entire time in a very clenched manner. Achiko couldn't even find an opportunity to lift the mood as she usually did with her cheerful demeanor. She did try though when they got their food and sat down. The rice here is really delicious, isn't it? She asked with a hopeful smile. Midoriya looked down at his food and heaved a deep sigh. Even though I've been chosen as class rep, I don't know if I'm qualified for it. You are? Achiko said with a nod. Don't worry about it, Tenya agreed. Your courage and judgment at critical moments make you worth following. That is why I voted for you. It was you. Midoriya gasped while Neon rolled her eyes. I knew it, she mumbled. You didn't vote for yourself, Ida-kun? But you got 1 vote. Achiko asked. That was me, Neon said as she chomped down on a baby corn tempura. I had a feeling, but thank you for your support even if it was futile, Tenya said with a bow to Neon. But didn't you want to be class rep too, Ida-kun? Achiko asked. You certainly looked the part with your glasses. Wanting to do it and being suitable for it are different issues. I merely did what I judged to be correct, Tenya said while Neon rolled her eyes again. You do things too much by the book, she said and then looked out the window. When you do become a hero, you're going to be tied down with rules and regulations enough. Why not take the opportunity now to do something in your self-interest just this once? That is a slippery slope, Nishiyama-san, he said and pushed his glasses up with both hands. I cannot allow myself to stray from this path of justice even if it is dash. Okay. Spare me the lecture. Neon sighed and put up her hands in defeat. At least vote. Based on experience. You've been class rep for as long as I've known you. If class rep was an actual career, you'd be a veteran. I've been wondering. Midoriya said softly, Ida-kun, since you're so familiar with Nishiyama-san, who's from a rich family, does that mean? Are you a rich boy, Ida-kun? Achiko interjected before Midoriya could find a way to say it delicately. Tenya sighed, I've been at least trying to change the way I talk to avoid being called that. But, yes, I am from a prestigious family. My family has been heroes for generations. I'm the second son. Amazing. Midoriya and Achiko exclaimed. You must have heard about the turbo hero, Ingenium Midoriya? Neon asked. Midoriya didn't even try to contain his fanboy nature. Of course I have, he shouted. He's a really popular hero who has 65 sidekicks working at his agency. He is my elder brother. Tenya announced proudly. That's amazing. Midoriya and Achiko shouted. Even Neon couldn't help but let out a smile. Ida-san is a dependable hero, Neon said as she continued to eat. Yes, Tenya said, and his chest puffed up some more. He honors the rules and leads people. I set my sights on being a hero because I want to be like my brother. However, I think it is still too soon for me to lead others. Unlike me, Midoriya realized the point of the practical portion of the entrance exam, so he is more suitable for the job. Actually, about the entrance exam, Midoriya said slowly. Breathing. Neon stood up immediately as soon as she heard the alarm bell and her bubble appeared around their table. An alarm? Midoriya asked as he looked up at the lights that were beginning to flash. Wait, how can I hear sounds if I'm in the barrier? My bubble can work in the other direction too, Neon explained while her eyes darted to the windows and then the doors. We can hear everything still, but everyone on the outside wouldn't be able to hear us. There has been a level 3 security breach, announced a robotic voice over the intercom. All students please evacuate outdoors promptly. The older students got to their feet and clambered out the door first, leaving the first years looking at each other blankly. What is a level 3 security breach? Neon asked. Tenya gulped. According to the student handbook, it means someone is trespassing on school grounds. We need to get out of here before it's too late, Midoriya said as he watched everyone flood out of the cafeteria. Everyone stay close to me, Neon said. My barrier should be strong enough to push through people as long as someone like Kirishima breaks it. Do we really need your barrier? Midoriya asked. Neon didn't answer. Instead, she waited until they got through the door for Midoriya to see her point. Everyone was in a panic and pushing and shoving their way to escape. Because of the frenzied state, it was easy enough for Neon to use her barrier to push to the middle, but by the time they reached the middle, it was too congested and the barrier popped from the sheer pressure of the crowd. I'm being squished. Achiko gasped with her front firmly pressed against Neon's back. As expected of the best, Tenya groaned while being slammed against Neon's right side. Everyone reacts quickly in a crisis. They're too quick and it's causing a panic. Midoriya yelled from Neon's other side. Neon hated being jostled more than the actual proximity everyone was to her, even if it was very uncomfortable, and she clenched her fist, just seconds away from throwing a punch at someone just so they would stop touching her. She struck out her fist, but at the last second she grabbed Tenya's arm. Nishiyama. Do something, she seethed. You're all about structure and order, right? Organize this. Ichao. We don't know what danger is out there and dash. Isn't that part of being a hero? Neon shot back and Tenya's mouth clamped shut just as Achiko cried out. Achiko. Neon gasped as Achiko started to get pushed back by the crowd. Neon reached out, grabbed Achiko's hand and pulled her back to her side. Tenya's brows furrowed and he stretched out his hand. Oraraka-kun. Make me float. Neon. I know what to do, Neon said as Achiko slapped Tenya's hand and he flew up in the air. As he did so, something in the window caught his eye and he hesitated for just a second. Then he lifted up his pant legs and he rocketed to the front of the room and splat up against the wall, right over the exit sign. Neon put a finger to her throat and snapped her fingers. Everyone. Shut it up, she bellowed. The windows rattled and the students covered their ears. It was enough for them to forget about their fear and they noticed Tenya splayed out above their heads. Everyone. Everything is fine. It is just the media. There is nothing to panic about. Everything's fine. Tenya shouted, please remember this is UA. Let us act in a way befitting the best of the best. The tension in the air was lifted and the entire student body relaxed. The pushing and crowding stopped, making enough room for some students to get to the window and see that Tenya was right. The shouting turned into murmurs. Soon, the crowd dispersed with everyone heading back to their classrooms while the teachers handled the commotion outside. When the police came and went, everything returned back to normal. Ahem. Let's proceed, class rep, Momo said gently to Midoriya as both of them stood at the front of the class. Alright. We need to decide on the other class officers, he said, shaking with nerves, and then he gulped. But, first, can I say something? I think that Tenya Ida should be the class rep after all. He was really good at handling the emergency just now, and he did it in such a cool way. I think it would be best for Ida to do it. I'm good with that, Kirishima said as he turned to smile at the stunned Tenya. It's true that Ida was a big help at the cafeteria today. Yeah, Denki agreed, and he kind of looked like the person on the emergency exit signs, didn't he? Stop wasting time, Aizawa said from his corner. Just hurry up and decide so we can move on. Tenya got up to his feet. If the class rep has nominated me, then it cannot be helped. From this day forth, I, Tenya Ida, promise to do my best to carry out the duties of class representative. We're counting on you, emergency exit. Kirishima shouted. Emergency exit Ida. Denki cheered. As the day progressed and class finally came to a close, Neon couldn't shake a worrisome feeling that was clouding her. After class, she got up and headed straight for the principal's office. The fact that he was not there made the feeling grow even more. Oi, Nishiyama. Shouldn't you be heading home? Or do you want to be class rep now? Neon turned around and saw her homeroom teacher heading down the hall. I was looking for Principal Nizu. The principal is downstairs with some of the other teachers investigating the breach, he said. He stopped in front of her and he let out a tired sigh. I know what you are here for and there is no reason for you to worry about the trespassing. I overheard some third years say that this has never happened before during their time in school, Neon said, and, to borrow a line from Ida-kun, UA is an elite school. The security systems here are state-of-the-art. There is no possible way that ordinary members of the media could so easily dash. Aizawa put up his hand. You are bright, Nishiyama, and you have good instincts, but like I said, there is no reason for you to worry about it. The faculty is aware and we will handle it. I know it's not in your nature to do so, but I'm ordering you as your teacher to leave it to us pro-heroes to handle. Got it? Neon's jaws clenched and she nodded stiffly. And do not voice your concerns to the rest of the class. I know you and Ida are close, but dash. Now it was her turn to interrupt. I'll keep it to myself. I won't cause unnecessary panic, like today. Ah, Aizawa said with begrudging agreement. The student body did not act as rational as they needed. I will mention to the principal that moving forward, the teachers should make sure you are all prepared and can act accordingly in the future. Now, if that's all, Nishiyama, go home. Neon nodded. I'll see you tomorrow, sensei. Ah, he said as she walked away. He watched her round the corner and when she was out of sight, his usual complacent expression turned into a frown. He meant what he said in that the girl had good instincts. On paper, she more than qualified in being a hero in training. She had the drive and the determination to strengthen herself and to be of use to society. Yes, the girl had hero potential, but there was no guarantee that she would succeed. And it all came down to one thing, her mentality. She was rational. There was no doubt about that. In fact, he had never encountered another first year who was as fully aware of all the risks and hard work it takes to be a hero as Neon. Power and glory came to very few, but the weight and burden of hero work was something every hero had to shoulder, and she seemed to be extremely cognizant of it. She was not a passionate dreamer type like Midoriya, and admittedly, Aizawa actually was more like her than the other worrisome student in his class. However, he knew how important passion was to sustain a career in hero work. It was too easy to get jaded, and he had seen too many of his students and peers broken by failures and harsh realities. A broken spirit was much harder to come back from than a broken bone. What was her motivation for being a hero? Would it be enough to push herself when the going gets tough? To go beyond? Plus ultra? Yes, that was the question that she had not yet answered to his satisfaction. Maybe she hadn't figured it out herself yet. If that was the case, it was his job as her teacher to guide her. It was not like him to give his students the benefit of the doubt, but he saw enough potential in her for him to give her even a little bit. Maybe tomorrow's rescue training exercise would help clarify things. Help him see what she is like in the face of crisis. This would be close to the real thing. No papier-mâché props. No imagination required. Nishiyama Nian. Aizawa thought to himself as he headed back towards the teacher's lounge. What kind of hero will you be? Deku-kun. You're wearing your gym clothes? Achiko asked as she and Neon walked over to Midoriya. Both of them, along with the rest of their class, were in their hero suits. They stood in the school's parking lot and were waiting for the bus to come and take them off campus for their latest hero training exercise. Yeah, Midoriya said with a sheepish grin, they got ripped up during the combat training, so I'm waiting for the support team to fix it. Beep. Who gave that guy a whistle? Neon said with a scowl towards the class rep that was hidden behind the tinted visor of her helmet. Class 1A. Tenya shouted, using succinct and stiff arm movements that would put an air traffic controller to shame. Form 2 lines by your student numbers in order to make boarding the bus go smoothly. Beep beep. Ida Koen's going full throttle, Midoriya said. The bus isn't even. Kirishima complained just as the bus pulled up at the exact spot Tenya was standing in front of. Here yet? 2 lines. Tenya shouted. Neon sighed and got into place with the rest of her class. Todoroki was at her front and Hagakure stood behind her. I wonder what kind of rescue we'll be doing. What do you think, Nishiyama? Hagakure asked excitedly, her gloves gesturing wildly in the air. Do you think we'll be working individually or as teams? I hope it's a team exercise. I don't know how well my quirk would be by myself. If it's a natural disaster type of scenario, it would be best to be paired with Momo for the sake of adaptability, Neon said, although if it's a landfall or a cave-in, Noisy Boy's quirk would be useful too. And also if it's a hostage type of rescue and we need firepower. Like I'd ever team up with you, die job. You're not even good enough to be a sidekick. Eek. The hostile bark of Katsuki made Hagakure gasp and jump away from him instinctively. It caused her to push up against Neon, who in turn bumped into Todoroki. He lurched 1 foot forward but managed to stabilize himself enough so none of them would fall to the floor. Sorry Todoroki. Nishiyama. Hagakure squeaked and Neon felt the pressure relieve from her back. It's okay, Todoroki said as he stepped back into place. Sorry Todoroki, Neon said and did the same. She then turned to glare at Katsuki. Behind him, Midoriya's eyes were as big as dinner plates, which subsided her annoyance. Did Midoriya think a war would break out between her and Noisy Boy? The line started to move and when Neon stepped onto the bus, she couldn't contain her amusement and she laughed. Tenya sat at the very front of the bus with his head between his legs. The seating arrangement on the bus was not what he had planned. Instead of rows of 2 on each side of the bus, the first half of the bus had seats that lined up against the wall. Just sit anywhere you want, Tenya said defeatedly. Neon shrugged and then when she got on board, she promptly sat down next to Todoroki. He looked at her in surprise since there was a full row of empty chairs next to her. You're not the chatting type, Neon said with a shrug. I see, Todoroki murmured. The bus revved off and they sat in silence the entire time, which Neon appreciated even more so when Noisy Boy started yelling at people towards the front of the bus. It took them about half an hour to get to the training course, which was held inside a large building with a glass dome as the roof. In front of the gates rested golden letters U. Beneath it stood the legendary hero 13. He was clad in his usual puffy spacesuit with a spherical helmet over his head. Everyone. I have been waiting for you, he rasped through the speaker box in his suit. Wow. It really is the space hero, 13. Midoriya exclaimed, the gentlemanly hero who has rescued tons of people from disasters. Oh, I love 13. Achicho cheered. Come. Let's go inside without delay, 13 said as he walked up the front steps of the building and into its vast open door. The students entered the building with Aizawa-sensei in the back. The front door was actually elevated to the 2nd story and the entire building was just one big open space. They could see down below on the ground level that there were various disaster simulation zones set up and at the ready. Shipwreck, a landslide, an urban fire, a windstorm, and many other scenarios, 13 said as he spread his arms out. It is a specialized training ground that I designed with different types of accidents and disasters. Welcome to the unforeseen simulation joint. Woha! The students gasped as Aizawa walked to the front. 13, where's All Might? He asked. He was supposed to meet us here. About that. 13 said in a hushed voice that made Neon's ears perk up. It looks like he did too much hero work on his way to work and ran out of time, so he's resting in the lounge. That is the height of irrationality, Aizawa sighed, but it can't be helped. Shall we begin? Let's see. Before we begin, let me say one thing, maybe 2. Make that 3, or 4? 13 started to say, 5, 6, 7. Neon's eyes widened along with the rest of her classmates. How many warnings do they need for this place? 13 raised his hand. Everyone, I'm sure you are aware of my quirk, black hole. I can suck up anything and turn it to dust. Yes, Midoriya said while Achiko nodded emphatically next to him. You've been able to use that quirk to save people from all kinds of disasters, right? Yeah, but it is a power that can kill easily, 13 warned. Some of you also have quirks like that, right? In today's society, personal quirks have been certified and stringently regulated, so that doesn't seem to be a problem at first glance. However, please do not forget that there are many quirks that can easily kill with one wrong step. With Aizawa-san's physical fitness test, you found out about the possibility of your own hidden powers, and with All Might's person-to-person combat training, I think you experienced the danger of using those powers against others. This class is a fresh start. You shall learn how to use your quirks to save people's lives. You do not have powers so you can harm others. I hope you leave here with the understanding that you have powers in order to help others. 13 bowed. That is all. Thank you for listening. That was inspiring. Oh well. The students clapped and cheered at his speech, and even Neon couldn't help but feel moved by his words. To help others? All right then. First dash, Aizawa started to say. Neon flinched at the faint but high-pitched tone. It was barely there, but it was sharp enough to be annoying. What is that? Neon asked. Mina, who was standing next to Neon, looked at her curiously. What is what? Suddenly, the long strip of lights that lined underneath the dome flickered and sizzled with energy. Then it powered off, casting a shadow in the room with only the sun left as a source of light. A fountain at the center of the building began to sporadically spray out the water, and when it finally returned back to normal, a dark, black hole emerged from the curtain of water. Then the blackness turned even bigger until it became a black wall right in front of the fountain. Gather together and don't move, Aizawa shouted as people began to emerge from the black wall. 13. Protect the students. Is this like the entrance exam where the lessons already started? Kirishima asked. Idiot. Sensed the tone. Neon yelled as she pulled Kirishima back. So she could take his place at the front to see better? Those people are dash. Don't move, even you, Nishiyama, Aizawa ordered as he put on his goggles. Those are villains. What? The class gasped. The trespassing the other day was the work of these scumbags after all, huh? Aizawa murmured as his scarf billowed out and his hair waved up into the air. At least 30 villains emerged from the black curtain, with 2 hanging back at the fountain. The curtain started to condense until it formed a smoky black figure with narrow yellow eyes. Villains? How is that possible? There's no way they could get into a hero school. Kirishima demanded, coming up next to Neon. Sensei, what about the trespasser sensors? Momo asked. There's something jamming it, Neon said as she poked a finger into her ear to stop that irritating tone even for just a minute. Jiro? Can't you hear it? Faintly, but my hearing works better when my ears are plugged into something like the wall. Did they only appear here or around the whole school? Todoroki asked. Either way, if the sensors are not responding, that means they have someone with a quirk that can do it. An isolated area separated from the main campus during a time when a class is supposed to be here. They might be fools, but they're not dumb. This infiltration was planned with some sort of goal in mind. 13. Evacuate the students and try calling the school, Aizawa instructed. These villains even had something to counteract the sensors. It's possible someone with radio wave type powers is interfering. Kaminari. You try contacting the school with your quirk too. Sensei. With that many people, even if you can erase their quirks, a frontal battle would be. Midoriya said worriedly. You can't be a hero with just one trick, Aizawa said. I'm leaving it to you, 13. With that, he flew down the stairs with his scarf whipping behind him towards the mob of villains. Neon and the rest of the class watched with mouths agape as their teacher took down the villains one by one and sometimes even 3 at a time. Whether it was long distance or close hand-to-hand combat, Aizawa had a counter-move and offensive move for every villain that got in his path. With his goggles on, none of the villains could tell whose quirk he was erasing, which made them hesitate to move in and in turn, made it harder for them to work together. He was nullifying their advantage in numbers. Come on. Follow me, 13 said as he rushed back towards the front door. Everyone, listen to your teacher. We must evacuate. Tenya said as he and Momo jumped into the role of class reps and started to move the class forward. We need to hurry up and take shelter. This is not a time to spectate. Suddenly, a black warp sprouted in their path and the shadowy figure emerged out of it. I won't let you, he boomed as he stretched up several feet in the air. Nice to meet you. We are the League of Villains. It may be presumptuous of us, but we have invited ourselves into the home of the heroes, UA High School. 13 took a step back and used his arms to push the students behind him. We are here in order to have All Might, the symbol of peace, take his last breath, the shadowy figure stated. I believe All Might should have been here. Has there been some kind of change? Well, that is neither here nor there. This is the part 1M here to play. 13 flicked open the top part of his glove, but just when he was about to take aim at the figure, Katsuki and Kirishima leapt in front of him and charged at the villain. Hi-ya, they yelled. The explosion from Katsuki's quirk sent a large smoke screen that covered everyone's sight. "Betcha never thought you'd get beaten before you got to do anything," Kirishima laughed. "Heh," the shadowy figure chucked and then re-emerged within the smoke. "That's right. Even if you are students, you are excellent golden eggs." "No. Move away you two," 13 yelled as plumes of black smoke came out of the villain's body and surrounded the group. "My job is to scatter you all and torture you to death," he shouted as his black smoke consumed the class. "Nishiyama-san, get out of there." Neon heard Tenya cry out just as she felt herself get sucked into darkness and then, just as quickly, dumped out into what felt like the inside of a smoke box. Neon was sprawled on top of hot, wooden floorboards inside a room that was getting clouded with smoke. What happened? She got up to her feet and took off her helmet in order to see clearer. She instantly regretted her decision when she was hit with a coughing fit from the thick smoke. She dropped her helmet and ran to the sole window in the empty room. "Oh my God," Neon coughed when she got a view of the outside. She had somehow found herself in the middle of an empty but burning cityscape. "Got ya!" a man shouted as he charged into the room with a gas mask over his face and a knife in hand. "Nishiyama-san, get away from the window." "What?" Crash. Ojiro appeared from behind and he jumped up, grabbing the door frame and swinging his legs forward. He kicked the man in the small of the back. Neon jumped to the side as Ojiro sent the man flying right through the window, bringing a gust of warmed air into the room. "Thanks," Neon said as she picked up her helmet. "Where are we?" "I think we're still in USJ. 13 Sensei mentioned an urban fire as one of the scenarios, right? This must be it." "Yeah, I think you're right. Come on. We need to get out of here," Ojiro said. They managed to find a fire escape and they got a good look of their surroundings once they were safely outside. The buildings around them had fire sprouting out from its windows and balconies at almost every level. The streets and shrubs were ablaze as well. "We should find an exit out of this place and get back to the others," Neon said, and she eyed the boy's karate gear. "Ojiro, your strength is close combat?" "Yes," he said, "I am skilled in various practices of martial arts." Okay, I can work with that," Neon murmured as she sent her bubbles to hover in front and behind them at a 20-foot radius. At the same time, she also put up a bubble barrier that contained her and Ojiro. She grabbed Ojiro by the arm and ran down the burning streets. It didn't take long for Ojiro to recover from her sudden action and to keep up with her pace. "Nishiyama-san, do you have a plan?" "A vague idea," Neon said. "I mean, you heard what that shadowy guy said, right? They're after all might. And to do so this boldly, they must have a way to actually kill him. Or at least, something strong enough for them to believe they do. So we should definitely escape, right?" Ojiro asked. "Ring the alarm / I've been through this too long / but I'll be damned if I see another chick on your arm." Neon whirled around just in time to see 3 men running after them. "Shit." Ojiro dash. "Leave it to me," Ojiro said as his tail smacked through the sound barrier and he launched himself at the 3 villains. In midair, his tail knocked down one villain while he kicked down the other 2 with his legs. Then, his tail wrapped around one of the villains and flung him far off into the distance. "Whoa, Ojiro, you're kind of a badass, aren't you?" Ojiro almost tripped on his feet at Neon's words and he blushed. "Thanks." Neon grinned and looked up at the rooftops. "Come on, we need to get to higher ground to look for a way out." "Wait, Nishiyama," Ojiro yelled as Neon raced into a burning building. Wub 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 wub. He barely got through the front door when a deep bass resounded through the building, quelling the fires in the lobby enough for it to clear a path that led straight to a door with "Emergency Exit" labeled at the top. Neon had the palm of her hand out with her other hand pressing down on one of the buttons on her suit. Lights flickered up her arms and helmet while sound came booming out of her glove. "Sound waves can displace oxygen," Neon said as she rushed to the emergency exit door and kicked it open. "Come on. To the roof." They ran up the stairs with Ojiro being 1 step behind her. Neon knew he could easily overtake her, but she was also the one with the fire extinguishing ability. She was lucky that she ended up with someone so level-headed and congenial. "Nishiyama, when we find the exit, what do we do next?" he asked. "Get back to the others and get at least one of us out the door to get help," Neon said. Just one?" "Not all. You heard Aizawa-sensei, right? The villains chose to attack here when we're isolated away from the school. They might have enough power to take down All Might, but it's not enough to take on multiple pro-heroes. They deliberately jammed our sensors, which shows the last thing they want is for the other teachers to get here," Neon said. "So as long as one of us leaves and contacts the school, their plan would be thwarted and we have a chance of them retreating." "That's true," Ojiro said as they got to the roof. Now that they were on higher ground, Neon could get a closer look at the roof over their head. They were in an enclosed simulation that kept the smoke and fire contained and away from the other areas. It was a metallic roof, too hard and too high for either Neon or Ojiro to break. "Look for an exit," Neon said as she ran to one side of the roof. Ojiro nodded and went to the opposite side. 13-sensei didn't hold back, did he? "This is as real of a disaster zone as it gets," Ojiro said as he squinted to get a better look. "I can't see anything through this much fire and smoke. Nishiyama, can you see anything?" He turned to look at his classmate and then was shocked to find her looking at him with widened eyes and mouth agape. "What?" Ojiro said. "That's it, Ojiro? That's it." Neon yelled. "What? What do you mean?" Ojiro asked. "This is a disaster zone," Neon said. Ojiro blinked. "So?" Neon grinned. "So, let's create a disaster. Where are those damn kids? Anybody seen them? Anybody have a searching Quirk?" "These villains. Sounds like they've been rounded up and dumped here," Neon murmured to Ojiro in a sound barrier as they waited inside the second floor of a skyrise that was definitely modeled to resemble some sort of business center. The sound barrier took up almost the entire floor and it reached the 2-story high ceiling and covered a large sound bubble that made the one she created to thwart Todoroki and Shoji look like pebble. They don't even know about each other's abilities. If that's the case, maybe they aren't that strong after all? Maybe their plan to take out All Might was just overconfidence, Ojiro said with a hopeful smile. Neon shook her head. "Those two men that hung back while the others attacked Sensei? Those must be the bosses? They're just letting these thugs split us up and take us out. Which means, they highly underestimated us or else they don't know about our quirks." "How'd you figure?" Ojiro asked. "Because if they knew about my quirk, they wouldn't put me in an urban setting," Neon said as she finished containing above her a sound bubble that was taking over the room. "But, even I know your quirk and I'm not entirely sure what you are doing," Ojiro admitted with a scratch to the back of his head. Neon smiled. "You ready to go?" "Ah," Ojiro said as he bent down so that Neon could climb on his back. She broke the sound barrier and they jumped out the window down to a vacant street below, leaving behind her giant sound bomb. A trail of smaller bubbles followed Neon and when they reached the ground, Neon sent her bubbles forward to the cross street at the city center. She and Ojiro ran several blocks away to a small 3-story building and they ran up to the roof to see their plan in action. Neon pushed a button on her helmet and it activated the sound boosting technology she had requested. It gave her already sensitive hearing an extra boost with a radius of 5 blocks as long as the voices were above a whisper. "Ready?" Neon asked as Ojiro covered his ears and gulped. Snap. Through the shouting of the villains chasing after them, Neon heard the faint traces of her pre-recorded fake planning with Ojiro. "We just need to sneak into the office and once we get there dash," she heard her own voice say. I hear something. Over there. "Those brats are over there," someone shouted followed by the sounds of running. "They took the bait." She held her breath and waited. Within a second there was more shouting and more feet. She counted to 10 and forced herself to be patient. She needed as much of them to gather as possible. The more of them together, the more she could take out. There's nothing here. Did they run? I swear I heard something. Let's spread out and look for them. They have to be around here dash. Snap. Kaboom. 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 Neon snapped from both hands and suddenly 4 sound waves blasted through the middle floors of the 4 tallest buildings around the city center. They collapsed onto the streets with chunks of stone and steel metal beams crushing surrounding buildings. When the dust had settled, there was a makeshift wall of ruins encircling the villains at the center. "A disaster fitting for a disaster scenario," Neon said. "Okay, I bought us some time. Ready to go?" Ojiro nodded solemnly as he stretched out his leg muscles. "Leave the hand-to-hand combat to me." The two of them ran to the outer border of the city. There had to be a door along the wall and it was only a matter of time for them to find it. Taking out as many villains as possible was only a security measure to lessen any fighting they would have to do, even if Ojiro was quite good at it. An incessant ringing sound appeared within her ears. Temporary tinnitus was the side effect of overextending her quirk and Neon rarely had it get to this point. There they are. Get them. 4 men came running towards Ojiro and Neon. One had a large stick in hand. One had long, sinewy fingers and the other 2 looked perfectly normal, which made Neon nervous. Based on her perusing on the internet, the most plain ones usually possessed the most unexpected and dangerous quirks. "Nishiyama. Please leave this to me," Ojiro said as he charged forward. The stick in the first man's hand suddenly grew to a thick club and he swung it hard at Ojiro. who effortlessly ducked and kicked his attacker squarely in the jaw, knocking him away. The club flew out of his hand, returning back to its stick form and clattered at Neon's feet. The two plain-looking ones morphed in different ways. One grew taller and bulkier while the other turned into a dark green gloopy mess with two dripping arms and a slackened jaw. The bulkier man lunged for Ojiro while the goop went for the student's legs. Ojiro's tail flicked forward and he used it to push off the bulkier man's chest, but just as he was flying away, he was grabbed by a rope and yanked towards the villain by the man with sinewy fingers. His index finger had transformed into a long rope. Ah! Ojiro yelled as Neon rushed forward. In one smooth motion, she picked up the stick, stuck it in nearby fire and thrusted the flame right at the extended rope. H! The rope man screamed, retreating his rope and hurriedly blowing out the fire on his finger, but Neon did not dawdle to register his reaction. She swung out again and this time stuck the fire straight into the goop. Foam. The goop immediately burst into flames and the man returned back to his human form in order to roll around on the concrete. Why you dash? The bulky man yelled as he raised a fist. Thwack, thwack, thwack. Ojiro, now free from all hindrances, quickly kicked and thrashed the villains unconscious. He wiped his brow and straightened his back. Thanks, Nishiyama. I'm sorry for rushing in so quickly. I was just eager to do something on my part. The ringing in Neon's ears was getting louder so she could barely make out what he was saying since he had a naturally soft-spoken voice. She smiled to show that there were no hard feelings and she held up a thumbs-up sign. Then she motioned for them go forward and Ojiro nodded. Thankfully, they did not run into any more people when they found the exit. Neon could only assume that the group of men they had encountered were tasked to patrol, since their quirks were utilized mostly to capture. They turned the wheel attached to a giant metal door and it took both of their strength to open it. Kriek. They slipped out and slammed the door shut behind them before anybody could close in. When they got to the other side, Neon gulped. They were at the farthest corner of the building from the entrance. Neon couldn't hear that well now with the ringing and the fact that there were just too many noises of fighting and shouting. She closed her eyes and did the first thing that came to mind. She pointed the base of her finger to her throat. Class 1A. This is Neon with an announcement. Bang, bang, bang. There was pounding against the metal door as Ojiro twisted the wheel shut. Both he and Neon pushed their backs against it while Neon continued to announce her lie. With every word she spoke, the ringing in her ears got louder and louder, but she wasn't here to listen. Ojiro and I had found the emergency landline in the urban simulation zone. It's connected directly to the school. I've spoken to Chikamatsu-sensei. The school has been notified. I repeat, the school has been notified and they are on their way. All students to please proceed evacuation and to be safe. Class rep, with your quirk, you will need to lead the charge. I repeat, class rep, take the lead. Neon out. As the last of Neon's voice echoed through the dome, Tenya gritted his teeth and rushed forward past the warp man and towards the front doors. Neon's fake announcement was just enough for the villain to hesitate. She made a very convincing lie, but Tenya knew better. He knew the roster of the entire faculty. There was no Chikamatsu-sensei. In fact, Chikamatsu was the name of Akia's pet hamster. Her message within her lie was loud and clear. He needed to get help. However, Tenya knew she would be disappointed since he was already in the middle of doing so. She didn't need to waste her breath. Idakum. Jio. Achiko screamed behind him as she touched the metal casing shrouded inside the warp man's black fog and threw it up into the air. No! The warp man cried as he was pulled away from Tenya, who flung the front doors open and raced out. Stay alive, everyone, Tenya thought as he charged towards the school. Back in front of the urban zone, Neon tapped her ears with the base of her hand and grimaced when the ringing failed to subside. There hadn't been any pounding against the door since she finished her announcement. The villains must have gotten scared and decided to regroup. Or, they were waiting for the warp man to come get them. He did bring them here after all, but now that Neon was thinking about their entrance, she got an uneasy feeling in her stomach. Ojiro? Neon said, we need to get to the central plaza. I think Aizawa-sensei is in danger. But with what you just said, the villains should be retreating by now, right? Ojiro asked. Neon nodded. Logically, yes. But these are villains we're talking about. Even if they are not strong, their hearts could be the worst of the worst. We have to think of the worst-case scenario. They might not be able to get All Might this time, but what's going to stop them from taking out a teacher? Or even a student while they have us here? Bang, bang, bang. The door started to pound again and Neon slammed her body against it. Ugh, why now? Give it up already, she shouted. Nishiyama, Ojiro said as he held tightly to the wheel. You go. I can handle it from here. What? I can't leave you here on your own. Neon gasped. Have more faith in me. If it gets too much, I'll go into that mountain area over there and hide. I'm very fast, Ojiro said, but if it is as you said, the worst case scenario, then you should go. Bang. Go. Nishiyama. Ojiro said with a firm nod. You said you hated being useless, right? Well, you are no use to me here since you aren't good with fighting head-on, yes? So go where you can be of use. Neon drew in a breath. She was genuinely touched by Ojiro's words. Her hands clenched to her side and she gave him a nod back. Okay, thank you, Ojiro. You're a good guy. Stay alive, okay? Ojori smiled with a faint blush to his cheeks. You too. Neon raced towards the central plaza, and just when she could just make out Midoriya's hair off in the distance, there was a sudden force that blasted from where he was. Neon skidded to a halt and braced herself as not to get blown away by the strong gust. To her right, the waves of the shipwreck zone crashed against the wall, and over her head, the lights that lined the dome shattered on impact. Did Midoriya cause this? Smoke and dust plumed in Neon's direction and she ran straight towards it, to where Midoriya was. When she got past the water fountain, the dust had settled and she stopped once again, but this time out of sheer horror. What? She gasped. Aizawa laid face down in a pool of blood that was mostly coming from his head. His arms were bent at an unnatural angle. In front of him stood a muscular creature whose brain was exposed with no scalp for protection and a sharp yellow beak for a mouth. The creature had a hand on Midoriya's arm. From the outskirts of the shipwreck zone, Tsu had her tongue out and wrapped around Midoriya's waist, while a man who was quite literally covered in detached hands had his own hand outstretched towards both the frog girl's face as well as Minetta's. The man with the hand stopped and he turned towards Neon. Oh, another one? Nishiyama-san. Run. Midoriya yelled. Kaboom. The front doors blasted open and suddenly, a bulky hero with blonde hair and gleaming teeth came walking down the steps. It's fine. Why? Because I am here. All Might declared through gritted teeth and furrowed brows. Neon's senses were reeling, and it wasn't just because of the ringing in her ears. In a flash, All Might plowed through the remaining villains that stood between the plaza and the stairwell. Then suddenly he had Aizawa in his arms and placed at the bottom of the steps. Neon blinked at that moment, and when she opened her eyes, she found herself standing in front of Aizawa with Midoriya, Tsu, and Minetta at her sides. Huh? What? Minetta gasped. Everyone go to the entrance. All Might ordered as he faced the brained bird and the hand man. I'm leaving Aizawa to you. Hurry. He's unconscious. Minetta and Tsu said as they jumped into action. Minetta grabbed Aizawa's legs while Tsu started to pick up Aizawa by the arms. Wait. All Might. Midoriya shouted. You can't. That villain took a punch from 1F-. Took a punch that didn't break my arm, but he didn't even twitch. He's gotta be Dash. All Might flung his arm back but kept his eyes on the villains. Young Midoriya, he said, and then turned to pose with a peace sign at his temple. It'll be fine. Midoriya gulped and then took the weight of Aizawa off from Tsu. The students started to walk back towards the entrance while All Might charged forward. Carolina smash. Boom. Another forceful wind struck through the air, and it was very similar to the one earlier that Neon had felt from Midoriya. She looked at the boy, who had his head down and a clouded look across his face. Hey, Midoriya. Neon started to say when another explosion caused her to look back. What? What happened? All Might just suplexed that guy. So cool. Minetta cheered. Yeah, All Might. Aim for the balls. The dust cleared and then the students gasped. The warp guy had sprouted his warp right on the floor, and the suplex that was aimed to put the bird into the ground only succeeded in him coming out from under All Might and grabbing the hero by the sides. The sharp talons of the bird man pierced into All Might's flesh and deep red stains started to bloom out of his white shirt. No way, Minetta gasped. Tsu? Could you take Aizawa-sensei? Midoriya asked. Huh? Why? Tsu asked just as Midoriya handed her the teacher and sprinted towards the hero. Shit. I got his back. You guys get to the entrance. Neon shouted as she raced after him. Wait, Nishiyama. Midoriya. Tsu yelled as she struggled to get a good grip on Aizawa. Midoriya jumped into the air and stretched out his hand towards his hero. All Might. Young Midoriya? The warp man appeared in front of Midoriya to intercept, but then, snap. Two bubbles formed around All Might and Midoriya. Young Nishiyama? Boom. The ground shook and then cracked beneath Neon's feet as she sent an amplified bass through both shoulder speakers. Aish! She screamed through the ringing in her ears as she blasted the sound forward. The warp man's whole being wavered and shook, and it exposed the metallic can hidden within his body. It was started to vibrate from the sound waves. The Birdman let out a shriek and his hands loosened from All Might. The vibrations were hitting everywhere in their body and it rattled them from the inside. Get out of the way, die job. Neon was shoved aside and her base was cut off as well as the sound barriers around All Might and Midoriya. She fell to her feet as Katsuki blew right past her and sent an explosive punch at the warp man. Take that, he yelled as he grabbed the metal can and drove it into the ground. Watch out, Nishiyama. Neon stood back up just as a path of ice appeared right where her hands were. It stretched all the way to the Birdman, freezing him in place. Neon turned to see a stone-faced Todoroki blinking back at her. Rah! All Might growled as he pried open the Birdman's hands and backflipped next to Todoroki. Here I come, Kirishima announced as he charged from the air with a hardened fist towards the man in the hand. The villain jumped away at the last second and the boy hurriedly stepped back to stay in line with the heroes. Damn it! I didn't get to show off. Midoriya, All Might, you guys okay? Neon asked. Thank you for your concern, young Nishiyama. I'm fine. All Might declared. This is not acting so high and mighty now? Ha, you foggy nobody, Katsuki growled at the warp man who was struggling to get away. Keikaken, everyone. Midoriya whispered as tears formed in his eyes. Wipe those tears away, Neon said and then nodded towards the hand man. The day hasn't been saved yet. The hand man sighed. Kurogiri, our exit and entrance has been overcome. We're in a pinch. Katsuki's smirk deepened. You careless bastard. You're just what I thought you'd be. Only certain parts of you can turn into a misty warp gate. The fog gate covered your actual body, right? Ah. Kurogiri struggled even harder, which earned him a few light blasts from Katsuki's palm. A crazed smile grew on the boy's face. Don't move. If I feel like you're moving suspiciously, then I'll blow you up. His behavior isn't very hero-like. Kirishima chuckled. And he sounds like a psychopath, Neon added. The handman turned to the half-frozen Birdman. Nomu? He said. The ice shook and crackled as the bird struggled to pull himself back up to a standing position through the warp. As he did so, his right arm and leg shattered off. Still, he managed to balance himself and crawl a step closer to the handman. Even though his body's broken, he's still moving? Midoriya gasped. Get back, everyone. All Might ordered. The last bits of Todoroki's ice broke off the Birdman as muscles pushed out of the Birdman's right shoulder socket and right leg. His limbs regrew and he stood tall once more. What? Isn't his quirk shock absorption? All Might demanded. The handman laughed. I didn't say that was all he had. This is his super regeneration. Nomu has been modified to take you at 100%. Neon gulped. Multiple quirks, modifications? They might have sent thugs after us, but this right here is a bona fide supervillain. But first, the handman said, we need to get back our gate. Go Nomu? And Neon couldn't even get out the first word, let alone shout a full warning to the noisy boy. A shockwave sent her, Todoroki, Kirishima, and Midoriya flying forward as two forces collided where Katsuki was kneeling with the warp man. Something skidded back and hit through a wall that separated the forest zone from the shipwreck zone. I got you, Kirishima said as he grabbed Neon with one hand and then punched the floor with his hardened fist to keep both of them from flying any further. I didn't need your help, Neon said, pulling her arm away and getting to her feet, but I appreciate the gesture. Kaken. Midoriya shouted, but then he jumped when he realized that noisy boy was sitting right between him and Kirishima. Ah, you dodged. That's amazing. No. Shut up, scum. Katsuki yelled back. Then, what happened? Kirishima asked. Neon pointed at the broken wall, where All Might stood with his arms in front of him in a blocking stance. Was that punch intended for a child? Do you not know how to hold back? He coughed to the handman. It was to rescue my companions. I had no choice, the handman said. I mean earlier, that plain-looking one, he was about to punch me with everything he had, you know. Violence for the sake of others makes it admirable. Isn't that right, hero? The handman threw out his arms. You know what, All Might? I'm angry. I'm angry at this world that categorizes the same violent acts as heroic or villainous, deciding what's good and what's bad. Symbol of peace? Ah, you're just a device to repress violence. Violence only breeds violence. The world will know this once we kill you. Preposterous. The eyes of white-collar criminals like you burn silently. You just want to enjoy this yourself, don't you, you liar? All Might shot back. Todoroki stepped forward. It's 3 against 6. Ah, Midoriya murmured back. Kakin already exposed the fog's weakness. And that Nomu thing only seems to react to the hand guy's voice, Neon added. These guys are crazy, but if we back up All Might we can push them back, Kirishima said. No. All Might ordered, run away. You would have been in trouble if I hadn't done anything earlier, right? Todoroki asked. That was a different story, young Todoroki, and you have my thanks, All Might said, but it's all fine now. We'd be poor excuses for heroes if we turn our backs now, Neon said. All Might threw out his arm and gave a thumbs up. Then just watch as a pro gives it everything he's got, young Nishiyama. Nomu, Kurogiri, get him. I'll deal with the children, the hand guy ordered. The villain sprung into action with Nomu sprinting the furthest ahead towards All Might while the hand guy ran towards the students. I am the symbol of peace. All Might roared as his fist collided once more with the Birdman's, but this time the aftershock was 10 times more forceful. Hand guy tumbled back in the air and landed spryly on his feet, but also very far away from the students, while the warp guy was blown in the opposite direction. Neon herself had to lean forward and close to the ground to keep herself from getting blown away too, as All Might and Nomu struck again and again at each other with equal power. Woof hoa! Kirishima shouted as a particularly heavy force forced him back. Neon could feel herself straightening up from the wind despite her efforts. She put up a bubble barrier in hopes that it would help, but it popped almost as quickly as it formed. Just when she was about to fall back, her back hit something cold and hard that kept her in place. She glanced over her shoulder and saw a small pillar of ice behind her, and then she looked to her right to Todoroki. You looked like you needed help this time, he said. His voice barely audible over the increased ringing in her ears. Ah, thanks,